Chapter 31:41. Soon, 100 breaths of time had passed. The five-colored sword array that blotted out the sky actually stopped operating. And at this time, more than 400 Sky God Realm elite disciples had already been killed. Even several elders had been beheaded, leaving only 5 people alive. The 5 elders and 12 deacons surrounded the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, their hearts filled with fear. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect could only remain calm. He roared in a low voice, "Tianqing, even if this lord has never met you, this lord has already guessed that this is your doing. Apart from you, no one else has this kind of courage and means. Now that the Spirit Sword sect has been destroyed, we only have a few seedlings left. I hope you can let us go. Rest assured, as long as you spare us, we swear that we will never go against you again." The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was thoroughly terrified. He no longer dared to boast, and his tone also eased a lot. Even though the Spirit Sword sect had suffered such a heavy loss, the sect leader did not dare to show any resentment or hatred. Above the ruined mountain villa, a young man's voice sounded. Crisp and efficient, full of powerful domineering aura. "Before this lord has already given you a chance. However, you didn't cherish it, and even wanted to be Prince Lien's accomplice, still thinking about this treasure house. Since that's the case, don't blame this lord for being ruthless." There was no doubt that this was Ji Tianqing's voice. His answer also announced the death of the people of the Spirit Sword sect. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was immediately filled with grief and indignation. He roared in a low voice, "Kid, how can you be so vicious, killing us all in one fell swoop? Even though we work for Prince Lien, we haven't had any conflicts with you until now." As the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, he was usually very high-profile and dignified. At that moment, it was already very difficult for him to be able to say such lowly words in front of so many people. But unfortunately, Ji Tianqing was unmoved. He coldly replied, "Don't talk so much nonsense. Since you chose to follow Prince Lien, you must bear the consequences." As his voice fell, the divine sword rain that blotted out the sky once again poured down in torrents. Rumble! Bang 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 bang! A deafening explosion erupted in the sky, resounding through the clouds. The powerhouses of the Spirit Sword sect desperately unleashed their magical abilities in a futile attempt to resist the bombardment of the divine punishment. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. Everyone's divine abilities were immediately torn to shreds by the giant sword. However, the power of the divine greatsword didn't diminish as it pierced through a dozen elders and deacons. In an instant, blood splattered within the sword formation again, and screams rose and fell one after another. In just 10 breaths of time, all the elders and deacons were dead. Only the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was still alive, but he was also covered in blood and bruises. His long hair was disheveled, and the long robe he wore had turned into rags. His arms, legs, and chest were all marked with chopstick-sized marks. Even his internal organs were clearly visible. "Ah! You vicious beast, I'll fight you to the death." At this point, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect had to accept his fate. He knew that Ji Tianqing wouldn't let him off, and that today he would die without a doubt. However, even if he died here, he would drag Ji Tianqing down with him. Thus, he roused his life's divine power and brazenly launched a self-detonation. Huff! Huff huff! Suddenly, the sect leader's divine body violently swelled up, flashing with dazzling divine light. An aura that could destroy heaven and earth was released from his body. At this time, Ji Tianqing's voice sounded in the night sky. "Now you're determined to self-detonate, don't you think it's too late?" As he spoke, a huge palm the size of a palace descended from the night sky, ruthlessly slapping toward the sect leader. While dodging, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect laughed like a madman. "Ha ha ha ha! Are you finally afraid? Even if my death is insignificant, don't think you'll have an easy time. Even if I don't kill you, I'll make you seriously injured. After all, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was an 8th-stage monarch god, and his strength was very profound. He had enough confidence that even if he couldn't kill Ji Tianqing, he would still seriously injure him. However, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect didn't understand Ji Tianqing at all. The huge palm that descended from the sky instantly turned into a sword finger, and with a speed faster than the aurora, it ruthlessly stabbed the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect. Bang! Along with a crisp muffled sound, the shining golden sword finger pierced the Spirit Sword sect's sect leader. An even stranger scene appeared. The body of the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, like a deflated balloon, instantly became shriveled. Immediately afterward, his body quickly weathered, bursting into hundreds of millions of fragments. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect's self-detonation was rudely interrupted by Ji Tianqing. Not only was his self-detonation destroyed, his body collapsed and shattered, even his fighting spirit and fighting spirit were crushed to the point that not a single drop was left. Swoosh! A dazzling 5-colored godhead flew across the sky like a stream of light, fleeing toward the gap in the sword array. However, Ji Tianqing's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He directly flicked his finger and shot out 2 rays of sword light, which hit the godhead first. Gotcha! With a crisp cracking sound, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect's godhead was shattered. A dignified 8th-stage high divine monarch had fallen just like that, died in obscurity. The battle was finally over. The divine light and storm that pervaded between heaven and earth had also gradually weakened a lot. The mountain villa with a radius of more than 10 miles had long been leveled to the ground. Not even a single piece of intact brick was left. Ji Tianqing began to clean up the battlefield, searching for the fragments of the godheads of the sect leader and several elders. At this time, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others swarmed to Ji Tianqing's side. Everyone's mood was very excited, and their expressions were full of complacency. Ha 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 ha! Fortunately, we came 2 hours early. Otherwise, where would we find the treasury? I really didn't expect this. The Spirit Sword sect's secret treasury here actually stored tens of billions of cultivation resources. This time, we really made a big profit. There was no doubt that Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others had already searched the underground treasury long before the sect leader and the 400 disciples of the Spirit Sword sect arrived. The cultivation resources stored in the treasury had been divided up by everyone. After solving the matter of the treasury, everyone hid in the town and rested for a while. When the sect leader and the several hundred disciples of the Spirit Sword sect came over aggressively, everyone waited at ease and quickly settled the matter. From this moment on, the Spirit Sword sect no longer existed. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and removed the sword array. Then, he quickly left the ruins with Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others. The 7 major sects have already received their due punishment. Now, only the Divine Blade Union and the Thousand Flow sect are left. Although Niefeun has marked on the map that the Divine Blade Union and the Thousand Flow sect have branches and treasury. However, we only need to defeat the people of the 2 major sects to have a deterrent effect. While flying, Ji Tianqing silently calculated the next plan. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3142. 5 days later. The news of the annihilation of the Spirit Sword sect spread in the Raging Flame Divine Country. Countless sects and forces got the news from various channels and knew that the murderer was Tianqing from the Bloody Flame Divine Country. Not only that, but there were also all kinds of rumors in the Divine Country. The several major sects that had been destroyed by the divine punishment were actually destroyed by Tianqing. This person was extremely vicious and had entered the Raging Flame Divine Country with boundless murderous intent to stir up a reign of terror and kill all the major sects and forces. All kinds of rumors and news quickly spread in the Raging Flame Divine Country. For a time, all the sects and forces in the Divine Country were talking about Ji Tianqing. The people from these sects and forces had never seen Ji Tianqing before. They had only heard of his glorious battle achievements. Everyone described him as a three-headed, six-armed, ferocious-looking demon of slaughter. As a result, countless people hated him and feared him greatly. For a long time, the sects and forces of the raging flame divine country would turn pale when they talked about Tianqing. In short, Ji Tianqing was thoroughly famous in the raging flame divine country. Although he had a bad reputation, it could be said that his name had spread throughout the divine country, overshadowing countless powerhouses. It was said that even the royal family of the raging flame divine country was paying attention to him. The royal family expressed their anger and condemnation for his actions and massacring in the raging flame divine country. They advised him to surrender as soon as possible and accept the punishment of the royal family. Otherwise, the royal family would dispatch the imperial army and the Raging Flame Corps to arrest him according to the laws of the Raging Flame Divine Country. When this news spread, the people of the Raging Flame Divine Country, as well as the major sects and forces, cheered and applauded, expressing their support. Moreover, those sects that were trembling with fear and thought that Tianqing might visit them were looking forward to the king giving the order to kill Tianqing as soon as possible. Cloud Sun County. In the prosperous and affluent Cloud Sun City, in an inconspicuous house, Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui, and the others were sitting in a secret underground room, whispering. At this time, the stone door of the secret room opened. Sir God Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean and Right Emissary Blood Dragon entered the secret room one after another. Everyone saluted Ji Tianqing and Shui Lin. After greeting them, they reported, "Young Master, we've walked around the city a few times. As expected, we've heard a lot of news. Young Master, the news of the destruction of the Spirit Sword sect has spread. Moreover, the destruction of the previous sects has also aroused the discussion of the common people of the God Country. Young Master, you have already become a celebrity in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. It can be said that everyone knows about you. When we walked on the streets, we could hear the God race talking about your deeds." It was obvious that Sir God Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean and Shui Long were looking for information in the city. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Just as I expected. What other news is there? How did the outside world talk about this monarch? Report everything as it is." Hence, Sir God Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean and the other two reported the news that they had heard truthfully. After Ji Tianqing listened, the sneer on his face deepened. "Ha ha! This is clearly the news released by that bastard Prince Lien. He spread rumors to slander this monarch, deliberately causing panic and hostility among the major forces. As for the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom's royal family, they will also pretend to pay attention to this matter and gradually deepen the conflict with this monarch. In the end, the Raging Flame royal family will have enough reason to make a move." Hearing this, Shui Lin frowned and worriedly said, "Why would the Raging Flame royal family make a move? The common people are fooled by Prince Lien and simply don't know the truth. But the royal family should know that this is a grudge between us and Prince Lien. Why should the royal family get involved in this mess?" Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to speak, Nie Feiyun, who was standing behind him, took the initiative to explain. Sect Master Lin might not know, but the Raging Flame royal family and Prince Lien have a close relationship. If Prince Lien can deal with us, the Raging Flame royal family naturally doesn't need to make a move. But if Prince Lien is powerless, the royal family will help sooner or later. Damn it! Shui Lin frowned and cursed while gnashing her teeth. So to say, we are about to become public enemies in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Our previous opponents were only Prince Lien's forces and the Raging Flame royal family. But now, Prince Lien is deliberately spreading rumors to incite the various sects to join forces to deal with us. His inescapable net plan failed, so he wants to use this tactic to gather the power of countless sects to deal with us, the public enemies. The blood illusion god monarch worriedly said, "Young master, we can deal with Prince Lien's forces one by one and make them tremble in fear. But if all the sects of the Divine Kingdom join forces to deal with us, I'm afraid it won't be something that can be solved by killing. The more we kill, the more the sects will fear and hate us. They will become even more united and counterattack even more crazily. That way, Prince Lien's scheme will succeed." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "This monarch naturally understands this and is already mentally prepared. However, you don't have to worry. Those sects are just a motley crew and won't amount to much. As long as we cut off Prince Lien's wings as quickly as possible and kill him, everything will be resolved." Shui Lin promptly nodded in agreement. "Right. The most important thing right now is to cut the Gordian knot and deal with Prince Lien as quickly as possible. The Divine Blade Union's mountain gate is located 50,000 miles outside the city. Shall we act tonight?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, this monarch already sent White Dragon and Zhen Hong to scout for information. It won't be too late for us to act after they find out the Divine Blade Union's situation. Right now, the entire Divine Kingdom is in an uproar. The Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect are well aware that this monarch's next target is them. How could they sit still and wait for death?" Nie Feiyun expressed his affirmation and said with a grave tone, "Young master is right. The Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect are among the top 7 sects of the Divine Kingdom. Not only do these 2 sects have deep foundations, but they also have branches and treasure vault. They also have other sects as allies. Now that they have a premonition of danger, they will either think of ways to strengthen their defenses and resist with all their might, or they will huddle together for warmth, or transfer their wealth and foundations. In short, they will not sit still and wait for death. They will definitely take action." Just as everyone was discussing, a spiritual light flew into the secret room and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! The spiritual light dissipated and a communication jade slip appeared. Ji Tianqing glanced at it and smiled. "Don't worry, White Dragon has sent back a message." After speaking, he reached out and grabbed the jade slip, using his divine sense to read the content. After a few breaths of time, he finished reading the message in the jade slip, and his lips curled into a playful smile. In the face of a great enemy, the Divine Blade Union doesn't have much choice and can only do this. Although they are wise, their speed is still too slow. Let's go, we should move. Chapter 3143. South of Yunyang City. About 50,000 miles away, there was an endless mountain range. Hundreds of branches finally gathered in the depths of the mountains, in the most majestic mountain range, Yunyang Mountain Range. This mountain range was 30,000 feet tall and stretched for a few million miles. In Yunyang County, this was the largest dragon vein, and it was also the sacred cultivation ground where divine power gathered. The Divine Saber Union, which was ranked 4th in the God Nation, was located on this dragon vein. On a gently undulating hillside, there were rows upon rows of houses and mansions. Hundreds of houses and courtyards extended all the way to the peak of the mountain. On the peak of the mountain, which was shrouded in clouds, was a flat land with a radius of 200 miles. There were countless palaces and buildings here, and they were splendid, sacred, and dignified. This was the Divine Saber Union's headquarters, which had lasted for nearly 10,000 years. In the past, this was the sacred cultivation ground of the Divine Tao, a place where countless divine races revered and worshipped. But now, the splendid palaces and buildings were still there, but the sacred and dignified aura was gone. Batch after batch of Divine Saber Union disciples boarded the divine warships under the leadership of the black-robed deacons. Everyone was filled with grief and indignation as they boarded the Divine Saber Union's divine warships and left. Not only thousands of disciples, but tens of thousands of servants and odd-job workers were also taken away by the divine warship. Of course, before the disciples and servants left, they packed up their belongings and wealth. although the sect's elders and union master did not explain the reason. They only said that it was a temporary transfer and that they were taking the disciples to another place for training. But everyone had heard the news and was well aware of the situation. They were abandoning the headquarters and escaping to another place to seek refuge. All because that evil demon, Tianxing, was about to kill his way to the Divine Saber Union. The Divine Saber Union, the fourth largest sect in the God Nation, was actually forced to such a state by a brat from another nation. This was simply a great humiliation. Therefore, when the disciples left, they were filled with grief and humiliation. Many hot-blooded disciples were thinking in their hearts, it would be best if Tianxing did not come. If he really came to the Divine Saber Union to kill, they would fight to the death. They would rather have thousands of disciples die in battle and drag Tianxing down with them. At least they would not tarnish the Divine Saber Union's reputation. In the short span of an hour, more than 10 divine warships had already taken off. The White Dragon, who had been hiding in a nearby mountain and secretly observing the situation, was getting more and more anxious. Damn it! The Divine Blade Union is a bunch of cowards who are afraid of death. They actually fled? These bastards would rather bear the humiliation and become Prince Lien's dogs. If they publicly announce that they no longer serve Prince Lien, won't Master forgive them? Bai Long also understood that no matter how much the Godly Blade Union feared his master, they would not publicly announce their separation from Prince Lien. However, since the Divine Blade Union worked for Prince Lien, they were destined to be eradicated by Master. Otherwise, the Divine Blade Union would become a sharp blade in Prince Lien's hands and take away their lives. Master, Master, please come quickly. If it was an hour later, all the cowards of the Divine Blade Union would have escaped. White Dragon muttered to himself. Zhenhong, who was hiding not far away, heard his voice and said, Young Master has his own plans and arrangements. Why are you in such a hurry? Don't make any more noise. If we are discovered, young Master will have to come and save us again. White Dragon rolled his eyes and said disdainfully, With those cowards from the Divine Blade Union, they can't even escape now. How would they dare to attack us? Just as he finished speaking, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. Although the Divine Blade Union's actions are humiliating, they are wise. If you think that the leader of the Divine Blade Union is a coward, then you are gravely mistaken. Suddenly hearing this voice, White Dragon was overjoyed. He hurriedly turned around and saw a familiar figure standing 100 steps behind him. It was Ji Tianxing. In the forest behind him, Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean, and the others were also present. White Dragon hurriedly went up to greet him. After bowing, he reported the situation. Master, the people of the Divine Blade Union have already decided to escape. Since I arrived, the Divine Blade Union's disciples have been packing up and gathering at the square. An hour ago, they started boarding the divine warships and left. Now, 15 divine warships have already left, taking away about 3,000 people. There are still a few thousand people in the Divine Blade Union who have not managed to escape. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked, Other than the Divine Blade Union's disciples and servants, have you seen the Divine Blade Union's elders and leader? This. White Dragon hesitated. After thinking for a long time, he shook his head and replied, I have not seen them. Perhaps I am too weak. Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted him. It is not that you are weak, but the elders and leader of the Divine Blade Union have already escaped. Not only that, they have most likely taken away the Divine Blade Union's main elite force. Those who stayed in the Divine Blade Union and boarded the divine warships to escape were just ordinary disciples and servants. The Divine Blade Union is so cunning. Are they determined to go against us? White Dragon frowned, revealing a trace of disappointment and anger. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, Although the Divine Blade Union is afraid of us, they are more afraid of Prince Lien. Or maybe they trust and rely on Prince Lien more. Maybe the Divine Blade Union's leader is still dreaming that he can make contributions through this mission and be rewarded and promoted by Prince Lien. Lin Shui was not interested in these questions. She held the demonic blade and pointed at the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate not far away. She asked, "What do we do now? Do we kill those small fries or not?" Ji Tianxing said calmly, "Although the Divine Blade Union's main force and elites have escaped, there is no point in killing those small fries. However, we must do what we must. We must destroy the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate as a warning. Before we kill the Divine Blade Union's main force, as long as the Divine Blade Union's leader announces that he is no longer on good terms with Prince Lien, they will still have a chance to live." Lin Shui was relieved. She held the demonic blade and flew towards the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate. "That's more like it. Otherwise, we would have made a wasted trip. How embarrassing would that be?" When she finished speaking, she had already turned into a ray of bloody light and flew above the Divine Blade Union. Heaven's Wrath Blood Slash. She held the demonic blade with both hands. Her whole body emitted a bloody light that shot up to the sky. She used the momentum of splitting the heavens and earth to slash out a giant bloody blade that was thousands of feet long. Suddenly, the entire Divine Blade Union was enveloped in a dazzling bloody light. Kaboom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, the Divine Blade Union's protective array was activated. A 5-colored light barrier with a radius of 200 miles blocked the giant bloody blade. The bloody blade collapsed and exploded into thousands of bloody light fragments. The 5-colored light barrier was also trembling non-stop and emitted a strong divine power fluctuation. Such a huge commotion immediately alarmed thousands of disciples, servants, and odd-job workers. Countless people lost their heads out of fear and screamed in anger and fear. Chapter 31:44. There were still more than 1,000 disciples remaining in the mountain gate. There were still more than 3,000 guards, servants, and servants. Close to 20 divine warships were also docked in the air above the spacious square, waiting for everyone to enter. However, the sudden attack disrupted everyone's escape plan. Countless disciples, servants, and odd-job workers fled and hid in a panic. The 20 or so deacons were still able to maintain their calm and composure. They were already mentally prepared and knew that Ji Tianxing would attack the mountain gate. At the critical moment, they stepped forward bravely and shouted in a dignified tone. Soon, these deacons led a large group of guards and disciples to the various nodes of the protective array and worked together to support the array. More than 1,000 heaven god guards and disciples channeled their divine power to increase the power of the protective array by several times. Swoosh! Dazzling divine light flashed as the protective array was activated to its maximum. Lin Shui brandished her demon blade crazily and used more than 20 blade techniques in a row, slashing out hundreds of times. As a result, the great sect protection formation rumbled from the slashes and shook incessantly. There were even cracks in the array. However, those cracks quickly healed and the array was not broken. The disciples and servants of the Divine Blade Union were relieved when they saw that the array was so sturdy. However, Ji Tianxing arrived with Shui Huan, left emissary Jin, and Blood Dragon. He arrived above the mountain gate and raised his hand to activate the heaven-destroying sword array, causing 10,000 giant swords to fall from the sky. Swish! 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 20,000 giant swords fell like a meteor shower, covering a radius of a few hundred miles. It was not just the mountain gate of the Divine Blade Union that was affected. Even the lofty mountain under everyone's feet was covered by the sword array. The heaven-destroying sword array was instantly formed. The 10,000 giant swords carried a destructive force as they struck the protective array. Rumble! Crack! Crack! Suddenly, an earth-shattering sound, accompanied by a loud shattering sound, exploded in the sky. The protective array of the Divine Blade Union could not withstand the attack of the heaven-destroying sword array. After merely persisting for 2 breaths of time, the grand formation was blasted into pieces, and a myriad of pieces sprayed out. Once the sect protecting grand formation was broken, the doomsday of many disciples and servants would come. Without the protection of the formation, the 10,000 giant swords poured down like a torrential downpour, immediately drowning the entire mountain gate. The resplendent palaces, the luxurious manors, and the courtyards all collapsed under the 10,000 swords. Thousands of disciples and odd-job workers had no chance to dodge or resist, and were quickly killed by the 10,000 swords. Even the 20 divine warships could not escape the heaven-destroying sword formation, even though they had fled in panic. In the end, they were smashed into pieces by the tens of thousands of swords. For a full 10 breaths of time, the world within a radius of 500 miles was in chaos. Dazzling 5-colored divine light filled heaven and earth, and endless dust and debris covered the sky. The loud rumbling continued for a long time before it dissipated. When Ji Tianqing removed the sword formation, the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate no longer existed. Within a radius of 500 miles, everything was razed to the ground. The mountains, palaces, plazas, and mansions had all turned into dust. As for the 20 divine warships, the thousands of disciples, servants, and odd-job workers, they had also turned into dust and returned to heaven and earth. 2 deacons were very lucky. They had escaped the sword formation before the 10,000 giant swords descended and luckily survived. They had witnessed the destruction of the mountain gate with their own eyes and were scared out of their wits. They ran away without caring about anything else. Ji Tianqing's divine sense covered heaven and earth, and of course, he had discovered the 2 deacons. However, he did not kill them and allowed them to escape. After all, the 2 deacons would soon spread the news of the mountain gate's destruction. After the dust and debris had settled, Lin Shui, Bai Long, Shui Huan, Zhen Hong, and the others looked at the ruins in a radius of a few hundred miles and were speechless. Lin Shui frowned and asked gloomily, "Tianqing, did you do it on purpose?" Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked at her, his face full of confusion. "What do you mean by on purpose?" Lin Shui snorted coldly and said, "You could have destroyed the mountain gate with your sword formation. Why did you have to watch me make a fool of myself?" Previously, she had used more than 20 superpowers consecutively and had used all her strength. However, she had not been able to break through the sect protection array. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, had summoned 10,000 swords to attack. Not only had he destroyed the array, but he had also destroyed the entire mountain gate. The difference between the two was too great. Hearing Lin Shui's reproach, Ji Tianqing could not help but laugh. "You were too impatient. How can you blame me?" Shui Huan, Bai Long, left emissary Jin, and the others could not help but laugh. Lin Shui glared at Ji Tianqing angrily and ignored him. In less than a day, the news of the mountain gate of the Divine Blade Union being destroyed spread throughout the kingdom of gods. The first to hear the news was, of course, the leader of the Divine Blade Union. The truth was just as Ji Tianqing had expected. A few days ago, the leader of the Divine Blade Union had brought the main force and elites and escaped from the mountain gate. Moreover, they had taken away the important treasures of the mountain gate, which was more than 90% of the cultivation resources. 3 days ago, the leader of the Divine Blade Union had gone to the secret division and the treasury to take away all the important treasures and resources. Although the leader of the Divine Blade Union was furious when he heard that the mountain gate had been destroyed, he was secretly glad. However, he secretly rejoiced. Those who had been killed were ordinary disciples and servants. Their deaths were not a big deal. As long as the main force and elite disciples were still around, and they had 80% of the resources and treasures in their hands, the Divine Blade Union could quickly rise again. The only loss was that the mountain gate that they had built and operated for thousands of years had been destroyed just like that. It was really a pity. However, the leader of the Divine Blade Union firmly believed that as long as they followed Prince Lian's plan, they would be able to kill Tianqing quickly. As long as they killed Tianxing and made a great contribution, Prince Lien would give them more rewards and support. At that time, the Divine Blade Union would rise again and be even more glorious. 6 days later, Ji Tianxing brought the group to the mountain gate of the Wanlu sect. The situation was just as he had expected. The people of the Wanlu sect had already escaped when they heard the news. The dazzling and majestic mountain gate had long since been emptied of people. Let alone the treasury and resources, even the herbs planted in the medicinal field and the divine beasts raised in the beast garden had been taken away. Ji Tianxing was not surprised. He waved his hand and used the sword array to destroy the mountain gate of the Wanlu sect. Nie Feiyun suggested that they go to the secret treasury of the Wanlu sect to take a look. Perhaps the people of the Wanlu sect were lucky and were hiding in the secret treasury and stronghold? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and rejected the proposal. No need to go. The people of the Wanlu sect have enough time to transfer their wealth and resources. As long as their people are still alive, they can take a large number of treasures and resources and disperse to various places. We will be helpless. Nie Feiyun and Lin Shui both asked, then what should we do? What should we do next? Ji Tianxing calmly said, in addition to the destruction of the Spirit Sword sect, the main force and elites of the 7 great sects have been preserved. Moreover, their hatred and anger towards this monarch has also reached the extreme. Next, we will continue south to the Raging Flame Royal City. Prince Lien will certainly gather the main force of the 7 great sects and fight us to the death. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3145. Ji Tianxing and the others took the divine ship and headed south, heading straight for the Raging Flame Royal City. In the next 10 days, the Raging Flame Divine Country was in turmoil. Of the 9 great sects under Prince Lien, the main force of the Flying Cloud sect was destroyed, and Nie Feiyun surrendered. Not only was the Spirit Sword sect completely wiped out, but their sect and treasury were also destroyed. The other 7 great sects also suffered heavy losses, with their sects and headquarters destroyed. Fortunately, the elites of the 7 great sects were still there. Moreover, under the command of Prince Lien, they quickly gathered in the Heavenly Wolf County. The result was still the same as Prince Lien's original plan. The elites of the 7 great sects would fight Ji Tianxing and the others in the central part of the Heavenly Wolf County. Prince Lien's original plan was to use the 9 great sects to set up an inescapable net. But now, the 9 great sects were reduced to 7, and only the elites were left. However, this didn't affect Prince Lien much. Even the sects of the 7 great sects were destroyed, and countless disciples were killed. They had a blood feud with Ji Tianxing, so they were even more murderous and full of fighting spirit. In order to ensure the success of the siege plan, Prince Lien even used all his spies and scouts. Even the city lords and garrisons of the various counties and cities would provide him with useful clues and information. Although Prince Lien was overseeing the royal city, he was always aware of the movements of Ji Tianxing and the others, as well as their approximate location. 10 days passed quickly. That evening, Prince Lien received the latest news. The divine ship that Ji Tianxing and the others were on had already reached the central part of the Heavenly Wolf County. According to the direction of the divine ship, it would pass by the Heavenly Wolf County in a few hours. When he received this secret report, Prince Lien, who was recuperating from his injuries, immediately ended his cultivation and revealed a sinister sneer. Ha ha! Wretched little bastard, you are indeed arrogant enough. Heading south without changing directions, they headed straight for the capital. In the end, they still fell into my inescapable net. Although you came half a month later than Ben Wang expected, but you still came in the end. The main forces of the 7 great sects are waiting for you around the Heavenly Wolf County. This time, even if you don't die, you will lose a layer of skin. Prince Lien sneered to himself. Without wasting any time, he immediately ordered, Lien Air, immediately send a message to the leaders of the 7 major sections. Tell them to gather at Heavenly Wolf City and kill Tianxing. Let Old Dao and Luo Lushui take charge of the situation. No matter what, they had to kill Tianxing at all costs. After this battle, those who have rendered meritorious service will be rewarded handsomely. Those who die in battle will be rewarded with 3 times the compensation. Kneeling on one knee, the Lien heir hastily complied. He was about to leave the secret room to deliver the order. Wait a moment. Prince Lien suddenly called out to him, and added a few more words. Also, send this king's personal decree to Sky Wolf City. Say that the fiends from the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom are massacring outside the city. Order Heavenly Wolf City to immediately dispatch troops to arrest him. There must be no mistakes. Lien heir says yes again before bowing and leaving the secret room. Late at night, outside Skywolf City, the night sky was as dark as ink and cold winds howled. The mountains in the distance had become undulating shadows, like gods protecting the darkness. Wolf Head Mountain, which was 20,000 miles away from Sky Wolf City, seemed a little strange tonight. Usually, at night, the mountain was the world of beasts, with all kinds of beast roars rising and falling. But tonight, Wolf Head Mountain was unusually quiet. Not only were there no traces of divine beasts, but there were also no roars. The divine beasts that covered the mountain were probably scared away by the experts hiding in the mountain. In the dark forest and valleys, there were hundreds of Heaven God experts hiding. Above the mountain peaks and the sky, there were more than 40 divine lords hiding. The first to arrive and lie in ambush were the people of the Divine Saber Union. The leader was the Divine Saber Union's leader, Dao Qianqiu. He was a tall and sturdy old man with a face like purple jade and a head full of white hair. He wore dark golden battle armor and carried 2 dazzling golden divine sabers on his back. His eyes were like torches as he stared at the night sky in the north. His long hair fluttered in the night wind as he exuded a powerful and domineering aura. He had been famous for more than 3,000 years and his strength had reached the peak of the 8th level Divine Lord realm. His saber arts had long reached the peak. Behind Dao Qianqiu stood 2 middle-aged experts, one male and one female. They were both at the 7th level Divine Lord realm. They were the left and right protectors of the Divine Saber Union and had been famous for many years. Apart from that, there were 9 elders in the night sky. They were all mid-level divine lords. In the surrounding valleys, forests, and night sky, there were more than 30 low-level divine lord. They were all deacons of the Divine Saber Union. Everyone held their breaths and tried their best to hide their auras as they focused on the north. Everyone knew that Tianxing, who had destroyed the Divine Saber Union not long ago, would arrive tonight. Everyone was filled with anger and murderous intent. They were waiting for Tianxing to appear and fight him to the death. Tonight was the night to take revenge. Time passed quietly. Soon, it was the darkest moment of the day. In another hour, dawn would arrive. The Divine Saber Union's members were impatient. A few elders secretly sent voice transmissions to ask Dao Qianqiu, "Union Master, it will be dawn soon. Why hasn't that bastard appeared yet? Union Master, did we guard the wrong place? Did that bastard pass by us long ago? Union Master, why don't we take the initiative to search for that bastard?" Dao Qianqiu calmly waved his hand when he heard the elders' questions. "Don't be impatient. The young prince's orders cannot be disobeyed. The information he gave cannot be doubted. That bastard is very arrogant. Even if he knows that we are here to intercept him, he will not avoid us. Everyone, wait patiently. He will definitely come." Everyone had no choice but to obey Dao Qianqiu's orders. They could only wait patiently. After another 7 minutes, a miracle occurred. A bloody light appeared in the pitch-black night sky in the north. That hazy bloody light was like lightning tearing through the night sky. It wrapped around a pitch-black divine warship and flew across the sky at lightning speed. The first to discover that bloody light were Dao Qianqiu and the left and right protectors. The 3 of them felt their hearts skip a beat. They narrowed their eyes and sneered malevolently. He is here. That bastard is indeed here. I will send a message to the other sects now. The divine worship is traveling through the night sky without concealing itself or concealing its aura. How arrogant! Dao Qianqiu gritted his teeth and muttered. His entire body was bursting with killing intent. His white hair was also dancing wildly. Seeing that bloody light approaching, he decisively waved his hand and gave the order. Disciples of the Divine Saber Union, listen up. Use all your strength to kill that bastard Tianqing at all costs. Following Dao Qianqiu's thunderous voice, the 400-odd Divine Saber Union elites who were lying in ambush in the mountains let out a sonorous roar. Kill! In the next instant, hundreds of divine lights lit up the mountains, illuminating the area within 100 miles. Chapter 3146. Swish! 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 More than 400 disciples of the Divine Saber Union, led by dozens of deacons, charged into the night sky. In an instant, a huge net that covered a radius of 100 miles was formed, blocking the path of the divine worship. Everyone was holding onto their weapons, accumulating their divine power and preparing to unleash their most powerful divine abilities and killing moves. At this moment, the speeding bloody light dissipated. The black divine worship, which was as fast as lightning, suddenly stopped and hovered 20 miles away from the crowd. Seeing this, Dao Qianqiu, the left and right protectors, and the 9 elders hurriedly flew over. Many deacons and disciples wisely suppressed their killing intent and temporarily stopped their attack. Dao Qianqiu and the left and right protectors stepped out from the crowd and walked toward the divine worship. They shouted angrily, "Tianqing, your grandpa Dao is here. Why don't you surrender?" Their thunderous voice reverberated through the night sky, deafening everyone. The divine worship opened its cabin door, and with a flash of white light, a youth in a white robe walked out with a dignified appearance. Behind this youth in a white robe, several men and women walked out. They were all Sir God experts. Among them were Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, Bai Long, Left Emissary Jin, and Zhen Hong. Only Nie Feiyun and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary were missing. Nie Feiyun could not show himself for the time being, and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary still had to steer the divine worship. Dao Qianqiu and the left and right protectors immediately locked their gazes on the youth in a white robe and sized him up angrily. When they saw the youth in a white robe clearly, the 3 of them were shocked and secretly put their guard up. He is Tianqing? That bloodthirsty and ferocious demon? Although I have heard of him long ago, and have seen his portrait many times, I did not expect him to be even younger than we thought. His strength is also unfathomable. Compared to the young lord, this demon is even more mysterious and unfathomable. He makes people wary and fearful. Dao Qianqiu and the left and right protectors had a preliminary evaluation of Ji Tianqing in their hearts. At this moment, Ji Tianqing calmly looked at Dao Qianqiu and asked, "Are you the Alliance Master of the Divine Blade Union, Dao Qianqiu?" Dao Qianqiu said with a cold snort, "Little bastard, stop pretending. You personally destroyed our League's mountain gate and killed thousands of our League's disciples. How could you not know who this old man is?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Since the Divine Blade Union and I have an irreconcilable enmity, how can you still be so calm? Are you trying to stall for time and wait for the other sects to come and help?" Dao Qianqiu frowned as his thoughts were exposed. That's right, that's what he was thinking. This was because he also understood that it was impossible for the Divine Blade Union's 400 people to stop Ji Tianqing, much less kill him. The most likely outcome was that the people of the Divine Blade Union were all killed, and Ji Tianqing and the others left. However, Dao Qianqiu would never admit it in front of so many elders and disciples. He proudly stroked his beard and said with disdain, "Tianqing, you are now the public enemy of the kingdom of gods, and everyone has the right to kill you. Of course, the disciples of my Divine Blade Union can kill you here and cut you into pieces. However, the other sects have all suffered from your evil schemes, and like our Divine Blade Union, they all have a blood feud with you. Of course, this old man can't have the chance to kill you alone, so I have to wait for the other sects to kill you together. At that time, you will be cut into pieces, and your bones will be ground to dust. Only then can the hatred in this old man's heart be dispelled. Ji Tianqing frowned and said with disdain, "You are clearly afraid of my reputation, yet you speak in such a dignified manner. You are already so old, yet you are still so shameless, it is really embarrassing. Forget it, the people of the Divine Blade Union are not enough for this old man's sword. Since you want to stall for time, this old man will fulfill your wish. When the other sects have all arrived, this old man will deal with you all at once, saving more time." Ji Tianqing was speaking the truth, as he had originally planned to do so. The main reason was that he was afraid that if he used the heaven-destroying sword formation, he would quickly kill all the people of the Divine Blade Union. At that time, when the other sects arrived and saw the terrifying power of the heaven-destroying sword formation, they would not even have the courage to attack. In that case, the other sects would have to flee in all directions again. He still had to find another opportunity to wipe out the main forces of the other sects in one fell swoop. What a waste of time! However, Ji Tianqing's words sounded extremely arrogant and domineering in the ears of the Divine Blade Union's disciples. It was abnormally ear-piercing. "You damned beast, don't be so arrogant! A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. You are a butcher, an executioner. This union's disciples will fight you to the end. Tonight, the Divine Blade Union is united as one, and we vow to kill this evil thief." Many hot-blooded disciples and deacons roared with righteous indignation. Ji Tianqing could not be bothered with them. He stood proudly in the night sky and waited quietly. Lin Shui held the crimson blade and stood behind him. When she heard the curses and provocations of the Divine Blade Union's disciples, she was so angry that her teeth itched. She could not wait to start a massacre. However, with the lesson of the Divine Blade Union's Mountain Gate, she had learned her lesson and did not act rashly. The Blood Illusion God, Bai Long, and the rest were obviously more composed. All of them were silent, holding their swords and sabers as they waited for the other sects to arrive. However, they did not have much confidence in their hearts. With their small number of people, it was already very dangerous for them to deal with more than 400 people from the Divine Blade Union. If the main forces of the other sects arrived, the difference in numbers between the two sides would be even more terrifying. However, when they saw Ji Tianqing's calm and confident demeanor, they were relieved. Since Ji Tianqing was willing to wait, Dao Qianqiu was naturally more than happy to oblige. He and the left and right protectors were even secretly sneering. The rumors are true. This kid is indeed extremely arrogant and lawless. If he is not bluffing, how confident must he be to dare to wait for the other sects to arrive? The Divine Blade Union cannot fight alone. We must wait for the other sects to arrive before joining forces to kill this bastard. Since this bastard is so arrogant, there is hope for revenge tonight. In less than 15 minutes, a divine light flew over from the night sky in the west. When the dazzling divine light rushed over with murderous intent, the crowd could see clearly that it was a team of more than 300 people. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing and the others to observe, the leader of the group introduced himself in a loud voice. "Tianqing, you bastard! Overlord Pavilion's Su Donglai is here. Tonight, I will take your life to avenge my disciples." Obviously, this team was from Overlord Pavilion. The Pavilion Master, Su Donglai, was an 8th-level Divine Lord. Behind him were the Deputy Pavilion Master and a few elders, all of whom were middle-level Divine Lords. Ji Tianqing only glanced at the people from Overlord Pavilion and ignored them. Su Donglai thought that the Divine Blade Union was fighting with Ji Tianqing and that he would be able to save the situation if he rushed over. He did not expect that the Divine Blade Union and Tianqing's group would be facing each other without any intention of attacking. He had rushed over with his men from Overlord Pavilion, but he was ignored by the two groups of people. It was extremely awkward. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3147. Ji Tianqing and the others stood in the night sky, waiting for the wind to blow. In the southern night sky, Dao Qianqiu and the Divine Blade Union blocked the way, forming a large encirclement. When the Overlord Pavilion saw that both sides were not moving, they could only stop in the southwest night sky, holding their swords and sabers. Unable to hold back the awkward atmosphere, Su Donglai took 2 steps forward, looked at Dao Qianqiu, and asked for the situation through telepathy. "Senior Dao, what's going on?" "Our sect received the message and immediately rushed over to help. Your union has already intercepted that scum Tianqing. Why haven't you made a move yet? Could it be that the young prince has other orders?" Dao Qianqiu glanced at Su Donglai and couldn't help but say through telepathy, "Overlord Su, you're an old man who has lived for thousands of years. Why are you still so ignorant? Do you still need to ask about the current situation? No matter how much you want to take revenge, you can't rush to kill. If your Overlord Pavilion really rushes in, you'll all be killed in a moment. Wasn't the lesson from before painful enough? Can any of our sects deal with that demon Tianqing?" Su Donglai was 3 feet tall and as strong as an iron tower. His appearance was fierce and valiant, and his personality was also very fiery. His natal divine weapons were 2 thunder god hammers, and his combat power was very strong. It was because of this that he won the title of Overlord Su. However, this also proved that this person was brave but not astute, and had no shrewdness to speak of. After being mocked by Dao Qianqiu, Su Donglai's face was lost, but he could only endure it, not daring to lose his temper. After all, Dao Qianqiu was the leader of a top force and a senior who had made a name for himself earlier. Moreover, they were all allies in the same trench, and they would be fighting side by side in a moment, sharing life and death. No matter what, they had to maintain harmony. After a moment of silence, Su Donglai suppressed the anger in his heart and said to Dao Qianqiu through telepathy, "Senior Dao, you're right. I didn't think it through." Then, Su Donglai and the Overlord Pavilion's people waited patiently. Time continued to pass. After a while, more than 300 elite disciples of the Soaring Rainbow sect flew over in a mighty manner. Then, the elite forces of the Myriad Flow sect, the Mystic Moon sect, the Blue Thunder sect, and the Unique Tower arrived one after another. The elite forces of the 7 major sects had arrived and surrounded Ji Tianqing and the others from 7 directions. There were a total of over 2,500 people, and 90% of them were Heavenly Deity Realm elite experts. The number of lower Divine Lords reached over 260. There were also over 50 Middle Divine Lords. Even the High Divine Lords numbered more than 20. It could be said that such a huge battle array was rarely seen in 100 years. Previously, the people from the Divine Blade Union, Overlord Pavilion, and Soaring Rainbow sect were still wary of Ji Tianqing and did not dare to take the initiative to attack. They could only wait patiently. Now, with so many powerhouses and experts gathered, the people of the 3 major sects were full of confidence and fighting spirit. Almost everyone was certain that tonight's battle would be won without a doubt. No matter how powerful Tianqing was, it was impossible for him to leave this place alive. Over 2,000 experts from the 7 major sects were enough to destroy everything within a radius of 100,000 miles. It was more than enough to kill a peak 9th Heaven Divine Lord. Thinking up to here, the 7 major sects' sect masters, and alliance chiefs all became high-spirited and dignified. They all stood in front of the crowd and shouted at Ji Tianqing and the others, provoking them. "Tianqing, now that the inescapable net has been set, you have nowhere to run. Accept your death obediently." I said before that I will cut you into 1,000 pieces and grind your bones to dust before I can dispel the hatred in my heart. Now, it's time to fulfill my promise. Kid, haven't you always been very arrogant? Now that you're in such a situation, can you still be arrogant? Ha 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 ha. Back then, when you massacred the disciples of the various sects and destroyed the various sects, you should have thought of today's outcome. Bastard. I hope you continue to be arrogant and don't surrender. Otherwise, I'll look down on you. Yes. It's useless even if you surrender. I have to cut you into 1,000 pieces to dispel my hatred. The 7 sect masters and sect masters were all filled with righteous indignation and murderous intent, looking extremely confident. This led to more than 2,000 disciples of the 7 major sects, who were also confident that victory was in their hands. Many people were even discussing that with so many people besieging Tianqing, they were afraid that a round of bombardment would end the battle. At that time, Tianqing would be directly blasted into pieces. That would be too easy a death. They must not let him die so easily. Hearing the shouts of the sect masters and the clamor of countless divine realm experts, Ji Tianqing finally spoke. After waiting for 2 hours, the sky is already bright. You've finally gathered. Everything ends here. Dao Qianqiu, remember to send a message to Prince Lian before you die. Tell him to wash his neck and wait for me. Hearing these words, seeing that Ji Tianqing was still arrogant, the sect masters, elders, and disciples of the various sects gnashed their teeth in hatred. Dao Qianqiu was so angry that he laughed and was about to refute. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing had lost his patience and no longer gave him a chance to talk nonsense. Sword, come. Ji Tianqing made a divine art with both hands, shouted in a low voice, and used his trump card. Swoosh! Swoosh! Suddenly, the distant sky lit up with dazzling starlight. 20,000 starry swords rained down like a meteor shower, shrouding the entire area. Thousands of miles of heaven and earth were illuminated, and the originally bright heaven and earth were illuminated even more clearly. An invisible aura that could suppress heaven and earth instantly enveloped everyone. The violent and unparalleled sword intent that could destroy everything also fiercely suppressed the disciples of the 7 major sections. Seeing the 10,000 swords descending, the disciples of the major sects all changed their expressions wildly and let out a cry of horror. Oh my God! 10,000 swords descending again. Is this the divine punishment that was spread before? It's really Tianqing's doing. Danger! Everyone, let's work together to resist. After everyone reacted, they all panicked and used their divine abilities, forming a battle formation to defend together. After all, everyone knew the power of the divine punishment. Under the simultaneous attack of the 10,000 swords, the mountain gates of the various sects were destroyed in just 2 breaths. Not only did the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles turn into ruins, thousands of disciples were also blasted into smithereens. The power was extremely terrifying. However, by the time the disciples of the various sects formed a battle formation and cast spells to resist, it was already too late. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The heaven-vanquishing sword formation that enveloped a radius of 2,000 miles was instantly formed. Tens of thousands of divine giant swords that were 10,000 feet tall with unparalleled power blasted into the crowd of the 7 major sections. Boom! Boom, boom, boom! Following the deafening explosion, the heaven and earth became chaotic. The towering wolf-head mountain instantly turned into ruins and flattened to the ground. The battle formations of the various major sects were also blasted into disorder, and the elite disciples were utterly defeated. In just a breath's time, more than 400 heaven god experts died tragically under the bombardment of the 10,000 swords, turning into a rain of blood and smithereens on the spot. Not to mention the heaven god realm disciples, even the lower-level divine lord deacons could not withstand the power of the divine swords. Such a tragic scene shocked the people of the 7 major sects, causing everyone to feel a chill all over and fear in their hearts. Mobile version of the website. Chapter 3148. Before the battle, the disciples of the 7 major sects were full of confidence and high morale. Everyone thought that with more than 2,000 people from the 7 major sects attacking together, they would be able to kill Ji Tianqing in less than 2 rounds. But the truth was the opposite. Ji Tianqing's first attack was like a divine punishment. Both sides had only exchanged 1 round, and the divine attacks of the 7 major sects were defeated by the 10,000 swords. Moreover, more than 400 disciples from the 7th to 9th level of the heavenly god realm died tragically under the 10,000 sword. What kind of shocking reversal was this? For a moment, everyone was shocked to the extreme, dumbfounded. It was only then that the main forces and elites of the 7 major sects realized how terrifying Tianqing was. It was no wonder that this person could stir up chaos in the Bloody Flames Divine Kingdom and set off a bloodbath in the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom. It was no wonder that this person could become Prince Lian's enemy and make Prince Lian suffer losses time and time again. With such terrifying strength, even a 9th-level peak monarch god might not be able to compare to him. Just as everyone was in a daze, the Heaven Punishment Sword formation sped up and released more divine giant swords, bursting with even more power. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Sharp, ear-piercing sounds kept exploding in the sword formation. Sword light flashed and sword chi crisscrossed. An invisible sword intent covered a radius of a few hundred miles. In just a breath's time, more than 100 elite disciples died tragically under the 10,000 swords. Even those monarch god realm deacons were seriously injured when they were hit by the divine giant sword. The situation became more serious. The elites and main forces of the 7 major sects had no time to be surprised and shocked. Everyone came back to their senses and burst out with their most powerful strength. They displayed their most powerful divine skills to resist the power of the 10,000 swords. 7 huge battle formations were quickly formed. The dazzling divine power light caused chaos in the sword formation. The major sects resisted with all their strength, and it was effective. After 10 breaths, more than 300 disciples and more than a dozen monarch god experts could not resist the power of the 10,000 swords and were killed on the spot. Although this scene was tragic, compared to before, they had indeed stabilized their footing. In addition, the sect leaders and elders of the 7 major sects tried their best to resist the 10,000 swords and even took the initiative to attack Ji Tianqing and the others. As a result, Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui, and the others had no choice but to wield their Kenshin weapons and attack with all their might. Starry River Break. Ji Tianqing roared in rage. He gripped the Burial of Heaven's sword with both of his hands and hacked down the 1,000-zhang-long starry sword. Following this, Dao Qianqiu, Su Donglai, and the others were sent flying while spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Blood stains the horizon. Shui Lin sneered cunningly. She waved the blood saber with all her might and slashed out a 1,000-foot-long blood saber towards the crowd. Instantly, the dozen or so middle-level Divine Lord Elders were forced back by the blood-colored saber light. Sir God Blood Illusion, Bai Long, Zhen Hong and company also used their best skills to fend off the attacks of the Sir Gods. This world-shaking battle was destined to not end in a short period of time. As time passed, the losses of the 7 sects became more and more severe. The initial 2,000 disciples were gradually reduced to 2,000, 1,800, 1,300, 1,000 by the time the battle had been going on for 15 minutes. The number of disciples of the 7 sects had been reduced to 600. On average, the number of disciples of each sect that survived was less than 100. Even half of the dozens of lower-level divine lords had been killed. Only those upper-level divine lords could withstand the power of the tens of thousands of swords. They were only slightly injured and were not killed. The 7 sects had suffered heavy losses. On the other hand, Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui, and the others did not suffer any injuries. Not a single person had died in the battle. There were not even any seriously injured. However, Bai Long, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, and Zhen Hong were slightly weaker and had only suffered light injuries. The people of the seven sects could not understand and did not dare to believe such a great disparity. However, this was the truth. A heaven punishment sword formation was enough to change everything. The area within a radius of 2,000 miles was enveloped by the sword formation. This region was completely filled with sword light. If one was slightly careless, or if one's strength was slightly weaker, they would be enveloped by countless sacred giant swords and be smashed to pieces, perishing on the spot. As for the seven sects' disciples, no matter how desperately they counterattacked, it was also not of much use. Countless divine abilities and ultimate skills were all defeated by the tens of thousands of swords. Even if there were a few divine art light shadows that could avoid the bombardment of the divine swords, they could not unleash much power. Very soon, 30 minutes passed. The seven sects' numbers were reduced again. There were only 300+ people left. Those who could survive were mostly divine Lord Realm powerhouses. Only an extremely small number of celestial deity realm elite disciples were left. Furthermore, more than half of the 300+ people who were lucky enough to survive were also seriously injured. At this point in the battle, the people of the seven sects were already terrified. They could not imagine that Ji Tianqing alone could rival 1,000 troops. Just relying on a heaven punishment sword formation, he could annihilate several thousand experts. This was simply not something that a divine lord could accomplish. Probably only divine king powerhouses had such horrifying means. The various major sects people all had thoughts of retreating, not wishing to get entangled with Ji Tianqing anymore. They were also not willing to carry on the killing. But very sadly, the heaven punishment sword formation had been operating all along. Its power was extraordinary. Even if the various major sects people wanted to retreat, it was already too late. The heaven punishment sword formation sealed off 2,000 miles of heaven and earth. They could only escape with their lives by breaking through the seal of the sword formation. But that sword light that blotted out the sky and blotted out the sun was as dense as a rain of arrows. Everyone was already trembling with fear in the sword formation, advancing step by step with caution. If they wanted to break out of the encirclement for several thousand feet, they would have to suffer several hundred giant swords. Wanting to successfully escape the range of the sword formation was simply as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The situation at hand was truly a hopeless situation, a situation of certain death, resulting in the various major sects people being filled with sorrow, not knowing what to do. Continue fighting the great battle? Not only could they not injure Ji Tianqing and the rest, they would also continuously exhaust themselves, until they were completely wiped out. If they tried their best to break out of the encirclement and escape, they might have a chance of survival, but they would definitely have to pay a terrible price. Therefore, the leaders and elders of a few minor sects thought of a safer way. That was to declare a truce and surrender to Ji Tianqing. In everyone's eyes, Ji Tianqing was not a true demon who loved to kill. According to the rules of the Jianghu, as long as they surrendered, Ji Tianqing would not be so ruthless. Unexpectedly, the moment the leaders and elders of a few major sects expressed this intention, they suffered a severe blow. Ji Tianqing's unyielding attitude made it clear that he did not accept surrenders and did not need prisoners. Since the great battle had already begun, they would fight to the last drop of blood, until death. Such an answer made the people of the seven major sects extremely angry and humiliated. They had never thought that they would not be forgiven for surrendering while bearing the burden of humiliation. Ji Tianqing also claimed that if the major sects had announced their separation from Prince Lian before the great battle tonight, they would still have a chance of survival. Unfortunately, the seven major sects had chosen to fight, which meant that only death awaited them. Chapter 3149. Ji Tianqing's attitude was clear. The people from the seven sects no longer had any hopes or expectations. It was useless to admit defeat and surrender. They only had two choices. They could either fight to the end or break out of the encirclement. As the leaders of the 7 sects, the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect were the forces that Prince Lien valued the most. Their choice was obvious. They would follow Prince Lien's instructions and fight to the end. Even if they were completely wiped out, they would take Ji Tianxing down with them at all costs. Hence, the disciples, deacons, and elders of the 2 sects were unusually brave and fierce. As for the other 5 sects, they were not top forces to begin with. For them to be able to survive until now and still prosper, they naturally had the same way of survival. At any time, these sects would not give up their chance of survival for a moment of loyalty and morality. Hence, the sect leaders of the 5 sects came to an agreement and decided to work together to break out of the encirclement. The Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect fought to the end without any regard for their own safety. As for the deacons and elders of the 5 sects, they chose to break out of the encirclement with all their might. To Ji Tianxing and the rest, this was indeed a big problem. If they tried their best to stop the 5 sects, they would definitely overlook the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect, and they would be in danger. If they tried their best to stop the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect, they would give the 5 sects a chance to escape. Faced with this problem, Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest found it difficult to make a choice. However, Ji Tianxing's reaction was very calm. Furthermore, he had expected the 7 sects to react in such a way. Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest would find it difficult to stop the 5 sects from breaking out of the encirclement, and it would also be difficult for them to fend off the all-out attack of the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect. Hence, everyone asked Ji Tianxing through voice transmission, how should they choose? Ji Tianxing replied calmly, only the weak make the choice, and I choose to kill them all. Such confident and domineering words stunned Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest. While their blood was boiling and they were feeling heroic, they could not help but ask what should they do. Ji Tianxing said straightforwardly, all of you go all out to stop the 5 sects from breaking through the encirclement. I will control the sword formation to help. There will be no problem. As for the people from the Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow Sect, just leave them to me. Seeing him so confident, Lin Shui and God Monarch Blood Illusion felt worried. Young Master, are you going to intercept the Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow Sect by yourself? Are you sure? Brat, don't force yourself. Ji Tianxing didn't bother to explain. He immediately raised the Sword of Burial of Heaven and charged towards the Divine Saber Union and Myriad Flow Sect with an unparalleled stance. Heavenly Dragon World / Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He swung his sword with his right hand and slashed out a 20-mile-long golden dragon sword light that swept away the people of the 2 sections. Clenching his left hand into a fist, he punched out a mountain-sized dragon and elephant shadow towards Dao Qianxiu and Sect Master Wan Lu. In an instant, more than 20 Divine Lord powerhouses were forced back by the golden dragon sword light, their faces filled with shock. 6 Divine Lords couldn't dodge in time and were struck by the golden dragon sword light. Their divine bodies crumbled and their divine heads were shattered. As for the dragon and elephant shadow that destroyed everything, it forced Dao Qianxiu and Sect Master Wan Lu to retreat in a panic, allowing them to escape the calamity. Before the people from the 2 sects could recover from their shock, Ji Tianxing swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven again and used all sorts of Sword Dao superpowers. Swish, swish, swish. Instantly, the resplendent sword light that covered the sky and carried the power to destroy everything enveloped the deacons and elders. The violent and domineering sword intent enveloped the low-level and mid-level Divine Lords, causing them to flee in panic. Most of them managed to escape, but there were still a few Divine Lord powerhouses that couldn't escape from the sword light that filled the sky. They were turned into a bloody pulp on the spot. At the same time, Ji Tianxing used sky-piercing finger and sky-splitting palm to force Dao Qianqiu and sect master Wan Lu to retreat. It was a pity that the two 8th-degree realm sect masters were once unparalleled powerhouses who could summon the wind and rain. Now that they couldn't defeat Ji Tianxing even after joining forces, they were extremely aggrieved. The two of them were forced to retreat again, and could only watch as the deacons and elders under them were killed, but they were powerless to save them. Just like that, 3 breaths' time passed. When Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion and the rest saw how powerful Ji Tianxing was, the doubts in their hearts were dispelled. Since Ji Tianxing alone could suppress the Divine Blade Union and sect master Wan Lu, they had nothing to worry about. Therefore Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, Bai Long and the rest tried their best to kill the 5 sects and used all sorts of superpowers. If it was just the few of them, they definitely wouldn't be able to stop the people from the 5 sections. But with the help of the Heaven Eradication Sword Array, thousands of divine giant swords continued to kill the people from the 5 sects. This reduced the pressure on Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion and the rest by a lot. They didn't need to risk their lives to fight with the people from the 5 sections. They only needed to use all their strength to display all sorts of superpowers and ultimate skills to stop the people from the 5 sects, and it would be a success. The deacons and elders from the 5 sects were originally unable to move an inch because of the Heaven Eradication Sword Array's attack. Now that they were met with Lin Shui and the rest's attacks, they found it even more difficult to move forward and were in a perilous situation. 100 breaths' time passed. The people from the 5 sects huddled together and only managed to break through 80 miles. But the price they paid was extremely heavy. Close to half of the deacons and elders died under the bombardment of the 10,000 swords, and their god bodies and god sparks were turned into dregs. The path to break through was so difficult that it made the people from the 5 sects feel extremely hopeless. They were even thinking that if they didn't risk their lives to break through and fought with the people from Divine Blade Union and sect master Wan Lu, would the outcome be better? But when the people from the 5 sects turned back and looked at the battlefield in the middle of the sword array, they instantly dismissed this thought. Because Divine Blade Union and sect master Wan Lu's situation was even more miserable than theirs. Ji Tianxing alone, with the help of the Heaven Eradication Sword Array, had actually caused the people from Divine Blade Union and sect master Wan Lu to throw away their helmets and armor and be utterly defeated. Previously, there were still 60 over Sir God experts, but now, more than half of them had been killed. There were only 20 or so people left, and they were still fighting a bloody battle, but they were also arrows at the end of their flight. These people were the elders, guardians and vice-sect masters of Divine Blade Union and sect master Wan Lu. Basically, they were all Sir Gods of the 5th-degree realm and above. Those low-level Divine Lord-level deacons had long been killed off by Ji Tianxing. Even so, the surviving elders and protectors were covered in blood, and they were in an extremely miserable state. Even though Dao Qianqiu and sect master Wan Lu had also changed their strategy. They joined forces with the elders and guardians to launch a strong attack on Ji Tianxing. But the effect was minimal and Ji Tianxing could easily avoid most of the attacks. Occasionally, there were some secret arts that he couldn't avoid, but he could easily withstand it with his strong defense. Even if the experts from the 2 sects used all their strength to deal a fatal blow, Ji Tianxing really couldn't avoid it. He could also use the infinite sky of turbidity to resolve it easily. All in all, he was in an invincible position. No matter how the people from Divine Blade Union and sect master Wan Lu attacked, he wasn't injured. Chapter 3150. In the end, this earth-shattering battle lasted for nearly an hour before it finally came to an end. The people from the 5 major sects were the first to perish. Almost all the elders and protectors were dead. The few remaining sect leaders were also covered in blood and looked miserable. Their fighting strength had greatly decreased. At this moment, they were still 1,000 miles away from the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. Now that they had fallen into such a situation, the sect leaders were in complete despair. They knew that they would never be able to break out of the encirclement in this lifetime. Now that they were at the end of their rope, there was only one way to save their lives. That was to meet up with the elites from the Divine Knife Alliance and the Thousand Flow sect and fight until the end. However, when they saw the situation of the Divine Knife Alliance and the Thousand Flow sect, they felt a chill from head to toe. This was because the people from the Divine Knife Alliance and the Thousand Flow sect had also suffered heavy casualties. Almost all the middle-level Divine Lords had been killed. Only a few people were left. They were still fighting a bloody battle, but they were like cornered beasts. Among them were Dao Qianqiu, the left and right protectors of the Divine Knife Alliance, and the Thousand Flow sect leader and deputy sect leader. These 5 elites were all high-level Divine Lords. It would be difficult to kill them in a short period of time with the heaven-destroying sword formation. Ji Tianxing was alone. No matter how strong he was, he could not kill them quickly. The situation was in a stalemate. However, overall, Ji Tianxing still had the upper hand. Not only was he uninjured, but his fighting strength was also at its peak. His divine power was still abundant. It was as if he would never be injured or tired. He was undefeatable. Such a strong performance made Dao Qianqiu, the Thousand Flow sect leader, and the others feel completely hopeless and helpless. My God! How can there be such a perverted guy in this world? After fighting for so long, even if he was made of iron, he would still be full of holes. What kind of monster is he? Why is he not injured at all? Why is his fighting strength still so strong? It's only now that this seat finally understands why the little prince calls him a fated enemy. This lesson made us understand that we should never underestimate our enemies, especially those who are famous. Unfortunately, when we understood this lesson, it was already too late. If I could turn back time, even if I betrayed the little prince, I would never have participated in the assassination. Ha 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 ha. We've all been used as cannon fodder by the little prince. We're destined to die here today. The sect leaders and sect masters all felt the same, gloomy and hopeless. They were all terrified and regretful. If they could choose again, they would rather betray Prince Lien than obey orders and participate in this decisive battle. But they also knew that it was too late to say anything now. People make mistakes in their lives, and they have to pay for their mistakes. They can't escape from it. Now that things had come to this, it was useless to say anything else. Only by exerting his last bit of strength and bleeding his last drop of blood would he have a slim chance of survival. Thinking of this, Dao Qianqiu and the sect master of the Myriad Flow sect could not help but cry out, "Since we've chosen to fight to the end, we'll never turn back until we die. Life can't be restarted. Regret is useless. The only thing we can do is fight to the end." After shouting, the 2 of them led the left and right protectors and the vice sect master to launch a final attack on Ji Tianxing. At the same time, the sect leaders and sect masters of the 5 major sects also rushed over. "Senior Dao, Senior Luo, we're willing to fight side by side with you until the end. Seniors, we're here to help you." The sect leaders of the 5 major sects shouted loudly, waving their swords and sabers at Ji Tianxing. Seeing the reaction of the sect leaders of the 5 major sects, Dao Qianqiu and Luo Lushui were not excited at all. Instead, they smiled contemptuously. "A bunch of motley crew. Why are you here when you can't escape? Idiots with no integrity and strength of character. Didn't you try to break out of the encirclement? What's wrong? Now that you've failed, you think of us?" Since it was a matter of life and death, Dao Qianqiu and Luo Lushui did not show any mercy and directly mocked and attacked. The faces of the 5 sect leaders were very ugly. They were green and red with shame. But at this moment of life and death, the 5 of them did not dare to be angry with Dao Qianqiu and Luo Lushui. They could only explain. "Seniors, please don't blame us. We were confused for a moment and made a big mistake. Now that we've made up for it, I hope it's not too late. Since there's no way out, we can only fight to the death. We're willing to fight side by side with the two seniors. I hope we can kill the evil thief Tianxing in one go and complete the mission that the young prince gave us." The 5 sect leaders found a way out for themselves. Dao Qianxiu and Luo Lushui did not pursue the matter. In fact, with the left and right protectors and the vice sect master, it was almost impossible for them to break out of the encirclement. If they could get the help of the 5 sect leaders, at least their forces would be strengthened and their chances would increase. Therefore, the 10 high-level divine lords gathered together and worked together to attack Ji Tianxing. But Lin Shui, Blood Illusion God, White Dragon and the others also rushed over. With the 10 high-level divine lords attacking Ji Tianxing, they were outside, harassing and attacking the other divine lords. Even if they could not kill those high-level divine lords, they could hold them back and greatly reduce the pressure on Ji Tianxing. This was tonight's final battle. At the same time, it was also the battle of life and death for the 7 major sections. The 7 sect leaders and the 10 high-level divine lords spared no expense and used all their strength to fight Ji Tianxing and the others. But unfortunately, arms could not win against thighs. The difference in strength was there, and it was not something that could be changed by courage and fighting spirit. 30 breaths later, the sect leader of the Soaring Rainbow sect was killed by Ji Tianxing, dying tragically under the burial of heaven. 50 breaths later, the right protector of the Divine Blade Union was killed, his divine body and divine spark crumbling. 100 breaths later, the left protector of the Divine Blade Union and the sect leader of the Blue Thunder sect were killed by Ji Tianxing. As time passed, the 10 high-level divine lords were killed one after another, and the number of people kept decreasing. 15 minutes later, the 5 sect leaders were killed. 2 of them died under the joint attack of Lin Shui, Blood Illusion God, and the others. Only Dao Qianxiu and Luo Lushui survived to the end. Of course, the 2 of them were also riddled with wounds and broken limbs. Their fighting strength was extremely weak. Dao Qianxiu was still domineering. Knowing that he was going to die, he detonated himself, wanting to perish together with Ji Tianxing. However, Luo Lushui still had hope and did not detonate himself. Instead, he hurriedly dodged. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing used his ultimate skill and used the World Slash to instantly kill Dao Qianxiu, interrupting his detonation. Of the 10 high-level divine lords, only Luo Lushui was still alive. Not only did he not detonate himself, but he also shouted loudly for the battle to stop. He wanted to surrender and be loyal to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing rejected him on the spot, saying that he did not need captive. However, Luo Lushui said firmly, "No, that old fellow Nie Feiyun is not dead. He must have surrendered to you. Since you can forgive him, why can't you forgive me? As long as you spare my life, I will definitely be of greater use to you. I will be of greater help to you than Nie Feiyun. You are very sincere, but I don't need it. Goodbye." Ji Tianxing did not hesitate at all. He directly waved the burial of heaven and killed him. At this point, the 7 major sects were completely annihilated. Chapter 31:51. Luo Liushui's identity, status, and fame were all higher than Nie Feiyun's. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, how could he lower his proud head? Even if it was for survival, he surrendered to Ji Tianxing. Who could guarantee how much sincerity he had? After saving his life, his hatred and humiliation would flare up, and he would most likely seek revenge. After all, he was the sect master of the Thousand Flow sect, a top figure of the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. How could he swallow this anger? Although Luo Lushui might have more information and secrets than Nie Feiyun. However, after giving it some thought, Ji Tianxing decided that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. He would kill Luo Lushui on the spot to prevent future trouble. After all, the 9 major sects under Prince Lian had been destroyed. The only people he could use now were the people of the He Tian sect, the Raging Flame branch, and the powerhouses of the Raging Flame royal family. Ji Tianxing's next target was to point his sword at the imperial city and kill Prince Lian. Of course, if he could get the secrets of the great Yan Empire from Prince Lian, it would be best if he could get information about the boundless heaven continent and the Shura God Emperor. The battle was over, and the world returned to peace. It was morning, and the sun had risen. Ji Tianxing and the others' battle record was amazing enough to shock the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. But Lin Shui, Shui Huan, Bai Long, and the others were all heavily injured and covered in wounds and blood. They rested while cleaning up the battlefield and collecting the spoils of war. The battlefield, with a radius of 2,000 miles, was originally a rolling mountain range full of ravines and deep valleys. But now it had been razed to the ground, and the central area was deeply sunken. In a few years, the water on this battlefield would accumulate and become a large lake in the vast mountain range. The people who participated in this battle were the main forces and powerhouses of the 7 major sections. They were all well-equipped and had elite strength. Moreover, the 7 major sects had evacuated in advance and taken away the treasures in their vaults. Most of the cultivation resources and treasures were carried by the sect masters, protectors, and elders, and stored in the interspatial rings. So, Lin Shui and the others were the most excited about the spoils of war this time. In the battlefield, they found nearly 2,000 spatial rings and more than 1,000 sets of usable divine weapons. He casually opened a few spatial rings, and there was a dazzling collection. There were all kinds of divine stones, divine pills, divine materials, and rare treasures. It was a feast for the eyes. The various sects' celestial deity, realm disciples often carried several million on them. As for the disciples of the Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect, they were even wealthier. Their belongings were worth tens of millions. As for the deacons of the various sects, the resources stored in their interspatial rings were worth more than 100 million. As for those middle-level Divine Lord Elders, high-level Divine Lord Protectors, and sect masters, the amount of wealth in their interspatial rings was immeasurable. Each of them had cultivation resources worth billions, as well as all sorts of divine items and treasures that were hard to estimate. After a rough estimation, the total value of the spoils they had obtained was over 100 billion. Such a huge amount of wealth was already comparable to Ji Tianxing's savings. Shui Lin, Sir God Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jean had never seen such a huge amount of resources and treasures in their lives. Everyone was in high spirits, cheering and exclaiming from time to time. Shui Lin lamented, "Cultivation resources and treasures worth more than 100 billion. If I were to take them all for myself, I wouldn't have to worry about cultivation resources for the rest of my life." Of course, she was just saying it. She didn't really have the thought of taking them all for herself. Shui Lin, Left Emissary Jean, Zhen Hong and the rest also understood that she was just lamenting and shocked. After all, they had the same thought and were all shocked. After a few minutes, everyone finished cleaning up the battlefield and counting their spoils. There was a total of 2,010 interspatial rings, more than 1,200 sets of divine weapons and equipment, and more than 100 pieces of Divine Lord Expert's Godhead fragments. Everyone handed these spoils to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing wasn't just the leader of the group, he was also the core of this battle. Most of the middle-level and high-level Divine Lords were killed by him. More than half of the 2,000 disciples of the 7 major sects were killed by the Heaven Punishment Sword formation. It could be said that 70% of the 2,000 people of the 7 major sects were killed by him. Therefore, the spoils had to be distributed by him. Everyone felt that even if Ji Tianxing took 90% of the spoils, it would be very fair for him to only take out 10% of the resources to share with everyone. However, Ji Tianxing clearly didn't think so. He only wanted the 100 pieces of Godhead fragments and the interspatial rings of the 7 sect masters and sect leaders. The remaining 2,000 interspatial rings, more than 1,000 sets of equipment, and items worth 60 to 70 billion divine stones were distributed to everyone. Last night's battle was extremely dangerous. Everyone fought to the end, bathed in blood, and contributed greatly. I haven't sorted out these spoils yet. I will distribute them to everyone after sorting them out. After he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing put away the spoils of war. He would distribute them to everyone after sorting them out. No one had any objections. Lin Shui took out the divine warship, and everyone prepared to leave. However, at this moment, a dazzling divine light lit up in the direction of Sky Wolf City. A group of elite warriors wearing armor and wielding sabers, swords, spears, and halberds appeared a few thousand miles away from the group and charged toward them at lightning speed. In the face of such a sudden situation, everyone frowned and observed vigilantly. They saw that there were more than 1,000 people in the group, all wearing standard black armor and helmets. They looked murderous. At the front of the group was a middle-level divine lord wearing golden armor and a dark red cloak. He was dressed like a general or commander. Behind this person were 10 lower-level divine lords wearing silver armor and carrying swords at their waist. They looked like they had high official positions. As for the 1,000 warriors, they were all celestial god experts with strength between level 4 and level 8. Ji Tianqing and the others could tell at a glance that this group was not from a sect. They looked more like the guards of a city or a troop from a military camp. Since the group came from Sky Wolf City, Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered, "Could it be the city guards of Sky Wolf City? Are they also here to get involved?" In a flash, the 1,000-man troop arrived. When they were still 100 miles away, the 1,000-man troop spread out and formed a huge encirclement, surrounding Ji Tianqing and the others. The golden-armored general in the lead shouted coldly in a booming voice, "Who are you to dare to wantonly slaughter civilians outside Sky Wolf City? Surrender immediately!" A few lower-level divine lords in silver armor also roared with murderous intent, bolstering their momentum. "Foreign race thieves, this is Sky Wolf City's territory. Only death awaits you for daring to cause trouble here. We are the city guards of Sky Wolf City. We are under the orders of the city lord to capture the rebels. You cruel and bloodthirsty thugs, why don't you surrender now? Damn thugs, you are already surrounded. Don't even think of escaping." Chapter 31:52. The commanders and captains of the Celestial Wolf City Guard were imposing and dignified. After the 1,000 city guards formed a huge encirclement, they remained solemn and quiet. They appeared to be well trained. A murderous aura pervaded the air. However, Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui, and the others sneered. Ji Tianqing looked at the golden-armored commander and said in a dignified tone, "Don't play dumb. You should know who I am. The people of the 7 major sects are all dead, yet you still dare to show your face. I really admire your courage." The golden-armored commander was clearly stunned. He frowned and asked in confusion, "What 7 major sects? What are you talking about? I don't know you. I'm only here on the orders of the city lord to encircle and annihilate the murderers. Kid, I don't care who you are or what power or background you have. You have violated the laws of Celestial Wolf City and will be punished. If you dare to resist, you will be an enemy of Celestial Wolf City and the entire kingdom of gods." Not only was the golden-armored commander's expression strange, but the reactions of the 10 silver-armored captains were also strange. Ji Tianqing could see that the golden-armored commander and the silver-armored captains really did not know him. They also did not know what was going on with the 7 major sections. Seeing this, he could not help but sneer. "What a great accusation! Looks like this is the meaning of your death. Since you don't know me and are only here on the orders of the city lord, then let me tell you. You have been tricked by the city lord of Celestial Wolf City. All of you have been used as cannon fodder by him." Ji Tianqing's voice spread over a radius of 100 miles, and over 1,000 people heard it clearly. Instantly, the golden-armored commander, the silver-armored captains, and the 1,000 city guards all revealed complicated expressions. Most people snorted disdainfully, clearly not believing his words. They sneered contemptuously and whispered to each other. Only a few people revealed looks of surprise and doubt. They had some misgivings. However, the golden-armored commander quickly calmed down and sneered contemptuously. "Kid, don't try to mislead people with your lies and disturb the morale of my troops. The fact that you killed the innocent and massacred the common people is an ironclad fact. Don't even think about using such a clumsy trick to sow discord. I'm the commander of the city guards. It's my duty to protect the safety of the city and the citizens of Skywolf City." Several silver-armored captains spoke one after another, trying to persuade the golden-armored commander. "Lord Commander, that brat is deliberately trying to sow discord. You can't believe him. Commander, that brat is stalling for time. We can't let him succeed. Don't waste your breath on him. Let's take advantage of the fact that they are weak and haven't recovered from their injuries and encircle them now." Although Ji Tianxing, Xue Lin, and the rest were all monarch god powerhouses. If it was any other day, these city guards would have to be wary. But now Xue Lin, Xue Huan, and the others were in a sorry state. They were covered in blood and injuries and looked very weak. Therefore, these city guards were not worried, nor were they afraid of the crowd. The golden-armored commander listened to the instigation of the captains and decisively waved his hand, giving the order to attack. "City guards, listen to my orders. Immediately arrest the culprit who killed the innocent and bring him back to the city lord's mansion to be dealt with. If there is any resistance, kill without mercy." As his voice fell, the 10 silver-armored captains waved their divine swords in unison and roared as they charged toward Ji Tianxing and the others. Thousands of city guards also let out deafening battle cries as they charged from all directions. In an instant, the sky within a radius of 100 miles was covered by a dazzling divine light. Sword light and sword light covered the sky, and all kinds of dazzling divine light poured down like a flood. Soon, Ji Tianxing and the others were about to be engulfed by the radiance of blades and divine spells. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing calmly ordered, "All of you, enter the divine warship and rest. Leave these city guards to me." If this had been in the past, Xue Lin and the others would have been worried and stopped him when they heard this. After all, it was too dangerous for him to fight against 1,000 people alone. It was too exaggerated. However, after a few battles, everyone had witnessed Ji Tianxing's terrifying methods. Every time they would be shocked. Now, he had become an undefeatable legend in everyone's hearts. He was definitely powerful and invincible. Xue Lin and the others did not hesitate and immediately entered the divine warship. In the blink of an eye, only Ji Tianxing was left in the sky. He put away the divine warship and formed a divine seal with both hands as he brazenly used a sword technique. Sword rain. As he roared, thousands of giant swords appeared in the sky and shot down like meteors. Each giant sword was thousands of feet tall and glowed with colorful light. They contained unparalleled divine power and violent sword intent that could destroy everything. Of course, the thousands of giant swords still needed a breath's time to fall. On the other hand, the city guards' attack drowned Ji Tianxing first. At this critical moment, he did not hesitate to use the infinite sky of chaos. His body became transparent and illusory. He became one with tens of thousands of miles of heaven and earth, as if he did not exist in this world, and was not affected at all. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light covered the sky and cut through the sky without any obstruction. It passed through Ji Tianxing's body and scattered on the ground. Instantly, hundreds of miles of land was blasted into ruins. The surrounding mountains collapsed, and Ji Tianxing was safe and sound. He still stood in the sky with a calm expression. Seeing this, the golden-armored commander and the 10 silver-armored captains were all stunned. They were extremely shocked. Even many of the city guards looked as if they had seen a ghost and exclaimed in disbelief. No one dared to believe that Ji Tianxing actually had such a strange method to easily resolve everyone's encirclement. At this moment, The golden-armored commander and the silver-armored captains suddenly had a bad feeling. They realized that the black-haired foreign race youth in front of them was ridiculously powerful. He was not someone they could provoke. Also, they would have to pay a heavy price, because the thousands of giant swords that covered the sky had already descended. The terrifying divine power and sword intent had already enveloped everyone. They were terrified and had a premonition that death was approaching. Boom, 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 boom. In the next moment, the thousands of giant swords slammed down fiercely, covering a radius of 300 miles. The earth-shattering sound immediately reverberated through the sky and spread for thousands of miles. This area immediately became chaotic. Dust filled the sky. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. The ground cracked and collapsed. It was as if doomsday had arrived. The golden-armored commander and the 10 silver-armored captains took out their life-saving divine weapons at the critical moment and used their unique skills to block the attack of the thousands of swords with all their strength. They were quite lucky. The golden-armored commander was slightly injured. The silver-armored captains were severely injured. Only 4 of them were killed on the spot. As for the thousands of city guards, they were not so lucky and did not have enough strength. Under the attack of the thousands of swords, they exploded into a bloody mist and dust. They were directly killed. When the thousands of giant swords dissipated, only a few lucky city guards were still alive. 99% of them had disappeared. Seeing this scene, the golden-armored commander and the silver-armored captains felt a chill down their spines. They were in despair. Chapter 31:53. The chaotic sky gradually calmed down. The previously bustling sky had now become incomparably cold and cheerless. Out of more than 1,010 people, only 10 or so were left. Furthermore, all of them were injured and covered in blood. They looked battered and exhausted. The stunned golden-armored commander and silver-armored captains finally regained their senses and immediately cried out in horror. Terrifying! It's too terrifying! He only used one move and killed all of our warriors. How can there be such a ferocious and terrifying person in this world? What kind of strength does he have? Devil! He's simply a devil! The silver-armored captains exclaimed. Their voices were trembling in fear. The golden-armored commander's face was also very pale. His forehead was covered in cold sweat and his eyes were filled with despair. They watched as Ji Tianqing stepped across the sky and raised his right hand, about to use his divine power again. Everyone knew that if the next divine power descended, they would all die. At the moment of life and death, the golden-armored commander roared loudly, "Stop! You devil, are you crazy? I'm the commander of the Heavenly Wolf City Guards. The Heavenly Wolf Commandery Lord personally appointed me. I'm also the general that protects Heavenly Wolf City. Furthermore, I'm a noble conferred by the royal family. If you dare to kill me, you'll be making an enemy of the Heavenly Wolf Commandery. You have no regard for the law and publicly trampled on the laws of the kingdom of God. You're making an enemy of the royal family and the kingdom of gods." The golden-armored commander spoke quickly. He had shouted so much in one breath, but he still felt that it was not enough. He continued shouting, "Kid, I advise you not to make a mistake. You killed more than 1,000 city guards and wanted to kill me. The Heavenly Wolf Commandery will definitely not let you off. The royal family will also do their best to encircle and annihilate you. If they don't punish you, where will the kingdom of God's laws and the royal family's dignity be? Even if you have extraordinary means, you're alone. How can you fight against the entire kingdom of gods?" On the surface, it sounded like the golden-armored commander was persuading Ji Tianqing and using the Heavenly Wolf Commandery and the kingdom of God's royal family to intimidate Ji Tianqing. But in reality, he only wanted to preserve his life. He now believed that the city lord had sent him on this mission to send him to his death as cannon fodder. However, Ji Tianqing remained unmoved and continued to approach the golden-armored commander. He said expressionlessly, "If you want to be cannon fodder, You should have the awareness of being cannon fodder. Since you've chosen to die, why should you regret it? If you do not die, the Skywolf City Lord will not achieve his goal. He will definitely be displeased. Therefore, it's better for you all to die. As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing waved his right hand and shot out dozens of dazzling golden sword lights that enveloped the golden armor commander, silver armor captain, and the others. Swish! Swish! A burst of dazzling sword light flashed. The golden-armored commander and the others didn't even have time to cry out before they were torn apart by the sword light. Blood rained down from the sky, and a few godheads flew out. They fled toward Heavenly Wolf City in a panic. Ji Tianqing waved his hand again, releasing more than 10 sword lights, shattering the divine deity. Dozens of shards of divinity fell from the sky. Ji Tianqing's figure flashed, and he put the godhead fragments into his interspatial ring. He didn't stay any longer. He took out the divine warship and entered it. Swish! The palm-sized divine warship immediately returned to its normal size and became 1,000 feet long. Left Emissary Jean and Right Emissary Blood Dragon steered the divine warship and streaked across the sky, turning into a black beam of light that headed south. 300 miles away from the battlefield, there were 2 heavily injured city guards covered in blood. They were hiding in the forest and gasping for breath. They had been at the edge of the battlefield and were very lucky to have escaped death and survived. Just now they had witnessed thousands of city guards being killed in an instant. The commander and captain had also been killed by Ji Tianqing. The 2 of them were scared out of their wit. They thought that Ji Tianqing would kill them all. They didn't expect Ji Tianqing to ignore them and fly away on the divine warship. Seeing the divine warship disappear into the horizon, the 2 of them heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Phew! Luckily, that guy didn't discover us. We managed to survive. That guy is extremely powerful. He killed thousands of people in an instant. How could he not discover us? He only treated us like ants and ignored us. That's right. What should we do now? Return to Sky Wolf City to report? Or escape? Return to the city, my ass. Didn't you hear what that kid said? The city lord knows who he is and deliberately sent us to our death. The commander and captain were all killed, and only the 2 of us were left. Who would believe that we were lucky enough to survive? If you dare to return to Sky Wolf City, I guarantee that you won't live to see tomorrow's sun. You're right. Let's not return to the city. Let's quickly leave this place. Anyway, everyone has been killed. The city lord will mistakenly think that we are dead and probably won't pursue the matter. After the 2 surviving city guards secretly discussed for a moment, they did not return to Celestial Wolf City. Instead, they fled without a trace. Inside the divine warship, in the conference hall, Lin Shui, Blood Illusion, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon, White Dragon, and Zhen Hong were all present. Everyone looked at Ji Tianqing, who was sitting at the head of the table, with concern and worry in their eyes. Lin Shui smiled and said, "You killed those city guards so quickly. I thought that you used that sword array again. I didn't expect that you would have so many powerful sword arts in addition to the sword array." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said indifferently, "They're just a bunch of ants. They won't take up too much of my time." Blood Illusion frowned and said worriedly, "Young master, although we all know that you are extremely powerful and are unrivaled in the entire Raging Flame Divine Kingdom, you should have left earlier. But you should have just left and not killed all the city guards." Gold Left Emissary also had the same idea. He nodded and said, "Young master, those city guards have different identities. They represent Sky Wolf City, Sky Wolf County, and the Divine Kingdom's royal family. In the wilderness, we fought with the people of the major sections. Even if we fought until the sky turned dark, the Raging Flame royal family could pretend not to know. But you killed more than 1,000 city guards like that. This will definitely shock the entire court. The entire Sky Wolf County and the Raging Flame royal family will do their best to encircle and annihilate us." The Blood Dragon Right Emissary and Zhen Hong were also aware of this point and nodded in agreement. Only White Dragon and Lin Shui didn't care about it. We already killed them. What's the point of saying this now? To my master, the Raging Flame royal family is nothing to fear. Didn't he kill the ruler of the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom before? Blood Illusion immediately retorted, but the situation is different now. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "You don't need to argue. I have my own plans. The royal family and Prince Lian know my whereabouts and purpose. The royal family didn't intervene before because Prince Lian still had a powerful force. But now that the 7 major sects are gone, Prince Lian's power is greatly reduced. I can only ask the royal family to take action. If the Raging Flame royal family wants to deal with me, they need a legitimate excuse." Thus, the Heavenly Wolf City Lord sent the city guards to their deaths. "In any case, I don't refuse anyone. Whoever wants to die, I'll satisfy them. The Raging Flame royal family is no exception." Chapter 3154. Raging Flame Royal City. In the same resplendent palace, in a secret room filled with divine power. Since last night, Prince Lian had not circulated his energy to treat his injuries. On the surface, he looked like he was resting in the divine liquid pool. In reality, he was waiting with some apprehension, unease, and anticipation. Although he was far away in Royal City, he was concerned about the situation in Celestial Wolf City. To him, the result of last night's battle was of utmost importance. The 7 major sects had attacked with hatred. More than 2,000 elite forces. Could they kill Tianxing? Prince Lian was not confident, not even 10% sure. He had a premonition that the elites of the 7 sects would most likely die under Ji Tianxing's sword. If that was the case, after the 7 sects were destroyed, Ji Tianxing would head south and head straight for Royal City. How would he deal with that? At the same time, he still had a sliver of hope. Dao Qianqiu, Luo Lushui, and the others were all high-rank divine lords with rich battle experience. More than a dozen high-rank divine lords, dozens of mid-rank divine lords, and nearly 200 low-rank divine lords. Such a powerful lineup should be able to kill Tianxing, right? Even a half-step divine king would have to die on the spot, let alone a peak divine lord of the 9th degree. When he thought of this, Prince Lian could not help but pray that the experts of the 7 sects would be able to kill Ji Tianxing and make a great contribution. Under such a complicated state of mind, the night quickly passed. It was early morning. Prince Lian could not suppress the anticipation in his heart and opened his eyes. He wanted to summon Lian Heir several times to ask about the situation in Celestial Wolf City. However, in order to maintain his calm and confident demeanor, he held himself back. About half an hour later, the door to the secret room lit up with divine light and a sound came from it. Obviously, since Lian Heir was asking for an audience outside the secret room, he must have important news to report. Prince Lian immediately perked up and waved his hand to open the door to the secret room. Creak, 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 with a soft sound, the door to the secret room opened. Lian Heir quickly walked into the secret room and went down on one knee in front of the divine liquid pool. As he bowed, Prince Lian quietly observed his expression. The Lian Heir's expression was solemn. His lips were pursed and his eyelids drooped. His tone was low and forceful. Prince Lian had a bad premonition when he saw this. As expected, the Lian Heir straightforwardly reported, "Reporting to Your Highness, Heavenly Wolf City has sent a message, reporting the results of last night's decisive battle. The situation was just as you expected. The elite forces of the 7 major sects were no match for Tianxing and the rest and were completely annihilated. The area of Wolf Head Mountain outside the city has been razed to the ground within a radius of 2,000 li. Not even a single corpse remains." However, Prince Lian had already expected this outcome and was mentally prepared for it. However, when he heard the news with his own ears and confirmed that his guess was correct, his heart suddenly dropped and his body trembled. The last glimmer of hope and fantasy in his heart was shattered just like that. He was stunned for a long time before he gradually came back to his senses. This time, he wasn't angry or irritable. He only grinned coldly. Ha 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 ha. I already knew that those trash from the major sects were unreliable. That bastard Tianqing seems to be getting stronger and stronger. I really don't know how he grew so quickly. If this continues, who in the great Yan Empire can subdue him? The Lien heir remained silent and didn't dare to speak. After a moment of silence, he continued to report when Prince Lien didn't speak. Reporting to Your Highness, apart from this bad news, there's also good news. Prince Lien raised his eyebrows and asked, There's still good news? He really couldn't figure out where the good news came from. The Lien heir quickly reported, Heavenly Wolf City has personally sent a message to report the situation to you. Last night, they followed your instructions and sent the city guard commander and 10 captains to lead thousands of city guards to encircle Tianqing and the rest. In the end, Tianqing and the rest resisted with all their might and indeed killed all the city guards and left. This matter spread throughout Heavenly Wolf City, and the Heavenly Wolf City Lord posted a notice expressing his anger and condemnation. He also said that he would go all out to hunt down Tianqing and the rest. The Heavenly Wolf City Lord also reported this matter to the Heavenly Wolf Princess and even the king. This morning, the king announced this matter in front of everyone in the imperial court, causing the officials to be filled with righteous indignation. The king flew into a rage and ordered the imperial guard to hunt down and capture Tianqing at all costs to uphold the law and restore the prestige of the nation. After the Lien heir finished his report, he said to Prince Lien, Your Highness, your plan went smoothly. Tianqing and the rest have become the public enemy of the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. The Raging Flame Divine Kingdom and the royal family also have a legitimate excuse to go all out to kill Tianqing. This should be considered good news. Hearing this, Prince Lien did not feel happy. Instead, he frowned and revealed a deep look of worry. Only an idiot like you would think this is good news. Prince Lien's gaze was cold as he shouted in a deep voice. The Lien heir's body trembled as he promptly kowtowed and apologized. This subordinate knows his mistake. This subordinate is slow-witted. Your Highness, please dispel my doubts. Prince Lien expressionlessly said, This king instructed the Heavenly Wolf City Lord to send a group of city guards to their deaths in order to incite public anger in Tianqing and give Chang'e an excuse to make a move. This was a very simple scheme, not a crafty one. If this king can think of it, Tianqing can naturally understand it as well. But this king's true goal was to probe his background and see how deep it is. If he didn't tangle with the city guards and chose to flee Heavenly Wolf City, it means that he still has some misgivings and doesn't dare to become enemies with the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. But he didn't have any misgivings and directly killed the city guards. What does this mean? He simply doesn't care about the revenge of the royal family. He has absolute confidence in dealing with this king and has enough strength to deal with the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. Moreover, he might have already known that Chang'e is loyal to this king. The Lien heir was greatly shocked and exclaimed in disbelief, How? How is this possible? The relationship between Your Highness and the royal family is a major secret. How could that bastard know? Prince Lien's expression was sinister as he coldly sneered. Don't forget, Nie Feiyun might not be dead yet. That old bastard is really cunning and can't be underestimated. This king is increasingly suspicious. In order to survive, he sought refuge with Tianqing and provided a lot of secrets and information to Tianqing. Otherwise, how could Tianqing have been able to find the target so quickly and accurately when dealing with the 7 great sects and the Spirit Sword sect? The Lien heir suddenly understood and angrily nodded. Nie Feiyun, that scoundrel, actually became a traitor and betrayed Your Highness. He deserves to die 10,000 times. Prince Lien calmed his anger and waved his hand. It's useless to talk about this now. Tianxing will soon arrive at the royal city. Immediately send a message, and have the people of the Raging Flame branch gather and be on standby. There will be a decisive battle outside the royal city within a month or 10 days. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3155. Sirius County. In a vast mountain near the border. This area was very desolate, surrounded by mountains for hundreds of thousands of miles. In the deep mountains there were few people. Who knew how many ferocious beasts were hidden? Fortunately, this area was rich in divine power and was also a place rich in resources. It was suitable for exploration and cultivation. Ji Tianxing and the others took the divine ship and stopped when they passed by this area. They hid in the belly of a 1,000-foot mountain and opened up a cave as a temporary cultivation place. Lin Shui shrank the divine ship to 10 feet and placed it in the cave. She, Blood Illusion God, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, and the others entered the divine ship to recuperate. Zhenhong's injuries were more serious. After all, she entered the state of madness in every battle and transformed into a 1,000-foot-tall dragon-blooded war goddess. She was too big a target and difficult to dodge. Her attacks were too powerful, so of course, her injuries were serious. Ji Tianxing trusted her more, so he took her into the Jiutian Tenju Tower to cultivate in the distorted time and space. This was her first time entering the distorted time and space. She was immediately stunned by the gorgeous scene in front of her. Especially when she learned that the flow of time here was 50 times faster than the outside world, she was even more surprised and shocked. After the initial shock, she came to a realization. She finally understood why Ji Tianxing's strength had skyrocketed. No wonder young master's strength has obvious growth every time he goes into seclusion. The longest is half a month, and the shortest is 3 to 5 days. It turns out that he's cultivating in seclusion here. 1 day here is equivalent to 50 days in the outside world. It was not difficult for Zhenhong to guess that Ji Tianxing's cultivation time was 50 times longer than the other God clan members. His talent was also outstanding. In addition, his identity and origin were mysterious. He had endless resources and super skills. It was natural for him to have such terrifying strength now. As Ji Tianxing flew in the distorted time and space, he soon saw several familiar figures. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, White Dragon, Black Dragon, and Qian Yu. Everyone had met before. Without Ji Tianxing's introduction, Zhenhong knew that these were the people closest to him. At the same time, she understood that today was the most important day of her life. From this moment on, it meant that Ji Tianxing truly trusted and accepted her. She also became one of the closest people to Ji Tianxing. In addition to being touched, he was also grateful. This was because she knew that a genius like Ji Tianxing, a peerless expert, was destined to have no lack of followers. If they were able to follow by his side, not only would they be able to obtain care and guidance, they would even be able to create all sorts of miracles and glory with him, and they would even be able to witness him walk to the peak of the divine Tao. To the ordinary Protoss, this was an opportunity and blessing that they would never encounter in their entire lives. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, and the others were all cultivating. They were about to break through again. Especially Ji Wushuang. He was currently at the peak of the celestial deity realm, and was about to break through to the divine lord realm very soon. Bai Long hadn't started cultivating yet. He greeted Zhenhong and went to find a place to heal himself. Ji Tianxing reminded Zhenhong, "This distorted spacetime is the place for us to rest and cultivate. You just need to find a place to recuperate from your injuries. After your injuries have healed, you can cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. I'm sure you've benefited a lot from the previous few battles. You must not miss this rare opportunity to comprehend." Zhenhong quickly nodded and said, "Don't worry, young master. Zhenhong knows what to do. I won't disturb everyone's cultivation." Ji Tianxing immediately chuckled and said, "Of course I know you. I definitely won't disturb them. I'm just afraid that they will disturb you. However, you don't have to worry. They have all accepted you. They have no ill intentions towards you. Zhen Hong naturally understood this. She just smiled and nodded, saying no more. She bowed to Ji Tianxing and left. She found a place tens of thousands of feet away, took a divine pill, and began to cultivate to heal herself. Ji Tianxing also did not delay and hurriedly sat down to meditate and cultivate. He first sorted out those divine spark fragments from the spoils of war. On the whole, it could be seen that they were the divine spark fragments of 136 Divine Lord. But in reality, many of the divine spark fragments were not complete and were somewhat missing. Fortunately, the missing divine spark fragments were all those low-rank Divine Lords, and a few middle-rank Divine Lords. As for the 7 major sects masters and protectors, they were all high-rank Divine Lords. Their divine spark fragments could still be pieced together completely. Thus, Ji Tianxing did not fuss about it. He cast the devouring divine ability and quickly devoured piece after piece of divine spark fragments. While absorbing large amounts of divine power, he also selected usable divine Tao laws from the divine spark fragment. This process was relatively long and also tested his patience. But he had cultivated for so many years and had long gotten used to it. After entering a focused state of cultivation, he even forgot the passage of time. Unknowingly, 3 months had passed. A full 90 days' time, Ji Tianxing only finished devouring and refining over 130 divine spark fragments. At the same time, he even stripped away 18 types of divine Tao laws from the divine spark fragment. Originally, he already grasped 292 types of laws. Adding on the newly added 18 types of laws, it reached as many as 310. Such a horrifying number of laws, only divine king powerhouses could achieve it. Surveying the entire Great Yen Empire, no, placing in the entire North Heaven region, even the entire boundless Heaven continent, there was absolutely not a Divine Lord who could grasp 310 types of laws like him. 300 types of divine Tao laws was the insurmountable chasm between Divine Lords and Divine Kings. And now Ji Tianxing did it. He broke this chasm and created another miracle invisibly. However, if he did not say it out, no one would know the existence of this miracle. Apart from the number of laws increasing, his strength also skyrocketed more than 3 times, reaching the peak of the 7th stage realm. He was already not far away from the 8th level Divine Lord realm. Ji Tianxing stopped cultivating and opened both eyes. Such a delightful harvest, but he was not agitated or overjoyed. Instead, he heaved a sigh. Sigh. The more divine Tao laws I grasp, the fewer laws I can refine. Interesting, powerful, high enough grade divine Tao laws are already getting lesser and lesser. Furthermore, the divine Tao laws that those divine lords grasp, 95% of them are all similar. At this rate, even if I refine several hundred sets of divine spark fragments at once, the laws obtained will also get lesser and lesser. No choice, after all, these people are all divine lords. I reckon that only by killing a divine king can I obtain large amounts of divine Tao laws. Ji Tianxing muttered to himself. After resting for a moment, he started to get busy with another matter again. Cleaning and organizing the spoils of war from before. Spoils of war worth over 100 billion were stored in over 2,000 interspatial rings. Wanting to sort them out was simply a massive project. If it were immortal, they would not be able to clear them out even if they used a lifetime or 100 years. But Ji Tianxing's divine soul and divine sense were already powerful to an unfathomable extent long ago. Just using 3 days' time, he finished sorting out the spoils of war and divided them into 8 portions. Chapter 3156. Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation and distributed the spoils to everyone. He first gave by long a share, which was stored in 3 interspatial rings. The total value was about 12 billion. The resources and divine items here were all useful to the White Dragon. Then, he gave Zhenhong a share, which was also stored in 3 interspatial rings. The value was about 15 billion. Bai Long and Zhenhong were the same. They were both in seclusion to heal their wounds. So, Ji Tianxing did not wake them up. He placed the interspatial rings in front of them and left quietly. He left the distorted space-time and returned to the cave. Then, he entered Lin Xue's divine ship. Lin Xue, Sir God Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary were all cultivating in their respective secret chambers. Ji Tianxing placed a few interspatial rings outside their secret chambers. Those were the rewards they deserve. Lin Xue received the most spoils, which were worth about 20 billion. The reward that Sir God Blood Illusion received was about 16 billion. Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary each received about 12 billion. So far, Ji Tianxing had distributed 6 spoils of war. The 2 remaining spoils of war in his hands were stored in an interspatial ring. One of them was shockingly valuable. It contained the belongings of the leaders of the 7 major sections. The total value was immeasurable. Just the divine weapons, equipment, elixirs and treasures inside were worth about 30 billion. If those strange and rare treasures were included, the value would be even more shocking. Of course, this spoil of war belonged to him. The other spoil of war only contained 1 billion worth of resources and treasures. This interspatial ring was for Nie Feiyun. Ever since Nie Feiyun admitted defeat and surrendered to Ji Tianxing, he had been conscientious and cautious. Ji Tianxing had never criticized him. He had even praised him twice. Even so, Nie Feiyun did not dare to let his guard down. He knew in his heart that he was the one who surrendered later. His identity was different from Lin Xue, Zhenhong and the others. Furthermore, everyone still hadn't completely accepted him as a member, so Ji Tianxing couldn't really trust him either. Under such circumstances, he could not have any complaints or dissatisfaction. He could only be more cautious and hope to seize the opportunity to perform outstandingly. Previously, Xue Lin and the others had participated in the battle and suffered serious injuries. Now they were recuperating. Nie Feiyun obeyed Ji Tianxing's orders and hid in the divine battleship. Naturally, he did not participate in the final battle. At this moment, he was alone in the secret chamber, but he did not cultivate. He was in a daze, pondering over a problem. Grand Prince Lien has been feuding with Tianxing for a long time. He has fought from the Blood Flame Divine Nation to the Raging Flame Divine Nation, but he has never been able to gain the upper hand. This time, when the 7 great sects fought against him, they were all killed by him. Both Dao Qianqiu and Luo Lushui were great figures who had dominated the divine nation for thousands of years. But in the end, these people were all unable to withstand a single blow from Tianxing. The 9 major sects loyal to Grand Prince Lien had been destroyed. Now, only the Heavenly Fusion sect and the Raging Flame Royal family remained under Grand Prince Lien's command. Judging from the current situation, Tianxing had a higher chance of winning. Back then, I decisively surrendered and was able to follow him. It was indeed a wise choice. Although I have yet to gain his trust, and the others are still on guard against me, I will persevere. However, as long as this old man perseveres, I may be able to gain their trust over time. In the future, if I can become one of Tianxing's confidants, or even his butler and loyal servant, that would be a great honor and glory. Nie Feiyun thought to himself, his heart filled with hope and anticipation. Even though he was once the master of a sect, a high and mighty figure. If others heard his words and knew that his wish was to become Ji Tianxing's loyal servant, he would definitely be ridiculed and ridiculed. However, he was well aware that this was not a humiliation at all. Instead, it was an honor, because he firmly believed that Ji Tianxing's future was limitless. He was also the genius who had the most hope of becoming a divine king in his life. did being a loyal servant and butler of an unparalleled divine king sound like a loss of face? Of course not. It would only make all the divine lords envious and jealous. Just as Niefeyun was daydreaming, the secret chamber's door lit up with divine light, and a sound came out. Niefeyun was immediately startled awake, frowning in confusion. Who would look for me at this time? Could it be that I have to go to war again? No. Everyone just stopped to recuperate for 2 days. It's impossible to go to war so soon. With a heart full of doubts, he got up and opened the secret chamber's door. A white-robed youth stepped into the secret chamber. It was Ji Tianxing. Niefeyun was stunned for a moment and hurriedly bowed, saying, "Greetings to young Master Tianxing. This old man is at your command." He thought that Ji Tianxing must have some matter or mission to suddenly look for him. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "You don't have to be nervous. This lord guessed that you didn't cultivate, so I came to take a look. There's no mission for you." Only then did Niefeyun relax a little. He was somewhat surprised and touched in his heart. Young master has a divine foresight, to actually guess that this old man didn't cultivate in seclusion? Ji Tianxing shot him a glance and said with a smile, "All right, don't flatter this lord anymore. You've followed this lord for so long, how can this lord not understand your thoughts? Not letting you participate in the decisive battle previously, you'll definitely think carefully and let your imagination run wild. This old man dares not." Niefeyun hurriedly bowed and said in a solemn tone, "I'll listen to young master's instructions for everything. How can this old man dare to have other thoughts?" Ji Tianxing frowned and said, "Chatting with you is the most boring. Forget it, this lord will get straight to the point." Finished talking, he took out an interspatial ring and handed it in front of Niefeyun. "In the decisive battle with the 7 major sects this time, we won a total victory and seized most of the 7 major sects' resources and belongings. Although you didn't participate in the decisive battle and didn't make any battle achievements. But you providing the information of the 7 major sects previously is also credit that can't be ignored. The things in this ring are your reward." When Niefeyun heard, he didn't even look at the ring and hurriedly bowed and declined, "Many thanks for young master's great kindness, but this old man didn't make any contributions, how can I dare to receive a reward? Young master, please take back the reward, otherwise this old man's heart can't be at ease. In the future, when this old man really makes a contribution, it'll be justifiable for you to reward me again." Ji Tianxing immediately revealed a playful smile and said, "All right, don't play the game of advancing in order to retreat with this lord. Could it be that this lord will think highly of you like this? Put away your little thoughts. This lord has always been clear about rewards and punishment. Gratitude and grudges are all right and wrong. Those who make a contribution should be rewarded, and those who make a mistake must be punished. If you decline again, then this lord will really take it back." Since Ji Tianxing said it so bluntly, Niefeyun no longer declined and hurriedly received the interspatial ring with both hands, accepting it with a heart full of joy. To him, how many resources and treasures were stored in this interspatial ring was not important. He was the Feiyun sect master. The resources and belongings in his hands were also worth 20 to 30 billion. What really made him happy and excited was that Ji Tianxing's attitude towards him was gradually changing. This reward was also the greatest affirmation and encouragement for his performance since he defected. Chapter 31:57. Ji Tianxing didn't say anything else. He stood up and left. If it was someone else, he would have encouraged them and said something like, "Keep up the good work." But he felt that there was no need to say those words to Niefeyun. This old man was a shrewd person. There was no need to say anything and he understood it on his own. After Ji Tianxing left, the door to the secret room closed again. Only then did Niefeyun reveal a gratified smile. He murmured in a low voice, "My previous efforts and performance were not in vain. Following such a wise and straightforward master is the most worry-free. Unlike that guy, Grand Prince Lien, who is too shrewd and temperamental. No one can fathom him and is always on tenterhooks. Under such circumstances, even if others submit to him, they will only fear him and will never be of one mind. Then, he opened the spatial ring and checked the resources and wealth inside. After a while, he counted out the total value of the wealth, and wealth was about 1 billion. These resources and wealth were dispensable to him, so it was not enough to excite him. However, when he saw a set of broken armor and 2 strangely shaped divine swords stored in the spatial ring, he could not help but tremble and tear up. He ignored the mountain of divine stones, divine pills, and divine artifacts and took out the damaged armor and dual swords. He hugged them tightly in his arms and tears poured out of his eyes. "Han-er, my Han-er, father finally sees you." The current Nyefeyun was no longer as calm and collected as before. He was heartbroken and in agony. He hugged the damaged armor and dual swords tightly and intimately rubbed them. He could sense a weak aura from the 2 divine artifacts. That was the aura left behind by his son in the 2 divine artifacts. It was also his only thought in this life. After all, the damaged armor and dual swords were his son's natal divine artifacts. There was also a matter of the past involved in this matter. About 100 years ago, his son, Nye Yunhan, and an elder of Soaring Rainbow sect went to a secret realm to explore and search for treasures. Nye Yunhan was young and full of vigor. He was at the age where he treated people with integrity and sincerity. His thoughts and shrewdness were still shallow. Before that, Nye Feyun had warned his son not to get too close with Soaring Rainbow sect. He always felt that the elder of Soaring Rainbow sect had an ulterior motive for getting to know his son. But Nye Yunhan refused to listen and firmly believed that the young elder of Soaring Rainbow sect was very congenial with him and could be called a confidant. Reality proved that Nye Feyun guessed right. After Nye Yunhan and the elder of Soaring Rainbow sect entered the secret realm, they disappeared without a trace. After half a year, the young elder of Soaring Rainbow sect escaped with serious injuries and returned to Soaring Rainbow sect to recuperate. But Nye Yunhan never appeared again. Nye Feyun went to Soaring Rainbow sect to ask the elder about his son's whereabouts. The other party informed him that Nye Yunhan had met with a mishap in the secret realm and had already died. He had risked his life to save Nye Yunhan, but he hadn't been able to save him. He had also been seriously injured and had been unconscious for a long time. Naturally, he had a dispute with the Soaring Rainbow sect's elder and almost came to blows within the Soaring Rainbow sect's mountain gate. In the end, it was the Myriad Flow sect that stepped forward to mediate and calm this storm. Nye Feyun could not accept the fact that his son had died. He personally led several elders of the Flying Cloud sect into the secret realm to investigate. In the end, they spent a few years and entered the secret realm 9 times, searching all the places. In the end, they couldn't find Nye Yunhan, not even his remains or bones. At this time, Soaring Rainbow sect grasped many secrets of Soaring Cloud sect. Soaring Rainbow sect acted in secret, killing many genius disciples and snatching many resources and treasures, causing Soaring Cloud sect's power to weaken. Nye Feyun was finally convinced that it was the elder of Soaring Rainbow sect who killed his son. Even the secrets and information that the Soaring Rainbow sect possessed were dug out from his son. Soaring Rainbow sect naturally refused to admit it. The 2 sects formed enmity and continued to fight for several decades, but the outcome was never decided. Moreover, Spirit Sword sect also had enmity with Soaring Cloud sect, so they also interfered. Soaring Cloud sect was attacked from both sides and gradually became unable to contend, gradually declining. It was also at that time that Prince Lien developed his power in the Raging Flame Divine Country, successively subduing Soaring Cloud sect, Spirit Sword sect, and Soaring Rainbow sect. Under the pressure of Prince Lien, the 3 great sects stopped fighting. However, the pain of losing his son made Nye Feyun unable to let go, and his hatred for Soaring Rainbow sect also never diminished. It was also because of this that he didn't hesitate to betray the seven sects when he sought refuge with Ji Tianxing. After the destruction of Spirit Sword sect and Soaring Rainbow sect, he secretly rejoiced and was grateful to Ji Tianxing. After all, Ji Tianxing helped him get his revenge. Now, Nie Yunhan's remains actually appeared in this spatial ring. These two divine tools became the objects of Nie Feiyun's grief. To him, they were priceless treasures. After crying and talking to himself for a long time, Nie Feiyun finally calmed down. He frowned and said to himself with a heart full of doubts, how did young Master Tianxing obtain Han's remains? Could it be from the spatial ring of that bastard from Soaring Rainbow sect? It should be like this. That bastard killed Han's son and guessed that this old man would explore the secret realm to find out the truth. Therefore, that bastard hid Han Er's relics. However, how would young Master Tianxing know the cause of Han's death and the grudge between this old man and Soaring Rainbow sect? Under normal circumstances, even if he took inventory of the spatial ring, he also wouldn't notice Han's remains. This question made Nie Feiyun puzzled after much thought. If it were someone else, they might feel that this was just a coincidence. But Nie Feiyun firmly believed that this was absolutely not a coincidence. It was definitely Ji Tianxing's deliberate doing. Therefore, in addition to being grateful to Ji Tianxing in his heart, he was even more in awe of Ji Tianxing. Young Master Tianxing is indeed unfathomable, his means reaching the heavens. Moreover, he's meticulous and uses kindness and authority. He's truly a peerless wise lord, worthy of this old man following him for life. Nie Feiyun had experienced too many storms and bumps in his life. Losing his wife, losing his son, his last disciple dying in battle, betraying his brothers, falling out with his good friends, and so on, he had experienced everything. His temperament had long faded, and he also had a deep understanding of the despicableness of human nature. Basically, there was no one who could make him respect and admire from the bottom of his heart. Even Grand Prince Lian only made him feel fearful. But now, he respected and admired Ji Tianxing. Just this matter alone made him see warmth in the cold, and decided to follow and be loyal to Ji Tianxing for life. After a long time, Nie Feiyun solemnly put away the broken armor and strange dual swords, his expression and eyes regaining calmness and clarity. He started to circulate his qi and cultivate, conserving his energy. He had already made up his mind to maintain his peak condition and be ready to fight at any time. Ji Tianxing treated him well, and he absolutely could not let down Ji Tianxing's trust and expectations. In the next battle, he must have an outstanding performance and establish meritorious service. Mobile version of the fastest website updated. Chapter 3158. After distributing the spoils of war, Ji Tianxing entered the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda again and cultivated in the distorted spacetime. He estimated that Lin Shui, God Lord Blood Illusion, and the rest still needed at least half a month to recover from their injuries. This way, he could still cultivate in seclusion for another 2 years in the distorted spacetime. Just nice. I'll make use of this opportunity to attempt to break through to the 8th level Divine Lord realm. Ji Tianxing made up his mind and entered the distorted spacetime, heading straight for the Blood Flame Sacred Tree. Before long, he arrived under the sacred tree. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and Ji Wushuang were all cultivating in seclusion under the sacred tree. Ji Wushuang had already reached the critical moment of breakthrough. White Dragon, Qian Yu, Black Dragon, and Zhen Hong were scattered around the sacred tree, also recuperating and cultivating. Ji Tianxing stopped and observed for a moment. Finally, his gaze landed on the sacred tree. He keenly discovered that the blood flame sacred tree seemed to have grown 10 feet taller. The burning blood flames were even more turbulent. Furthermore, many purple sprouts emerged from the bare branches and treetops. The entire sacred tree appeared to be full of vitality. Its power also clearly increased a bit. This discovery made Ji Tianxing feel delighted. Previously at the Skyfire Lotus Lake, I killed several hundred people from the Flying Cloud sect. In the end, the Blood Flame Sacred Tree did not have any obvious changes. I even thought that I was overthinking. Unexpectedly, when I killed the people from the 7 major sects one after another, the Blood Flame Sacred Tree clearly grew taller. Its power also increased by a lot. From this, it seems that my previous conjecture was correct. The Blood Flame Sacred Tree can indeed absorb divine soul and bloodline power to continuously strengthen itself. It's just that this sacred tree is a quasi-king level divine item. It needs to absorb a massive amount of divine soul and bloodline power to have an obvious growth. More than 1,000 people from 2 or 3 sects provided divine soul and bloodline power after death. To the sacred tree, it's very weak. Only when the number of deaths reaches a certain level, such as the several thousand people from the 7 major sects, will it have an effect. Thinking up to here, Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a moment. Another idea popped up in his mind. No. The amount of energy the sacred tree could absorb depended not only on the number of people, but also on the realm of the deceased. When I exterminated the Flying Cloud sect, I only killed over 20 divine lords. When the 7 sects were destroyed, more than 200 divine lords had died on the battlefield. From the looks of it, the more divine lord powerhouses that die, the more power the sacred tree can absorb. Ji Tianqing was in a good mood after understanding the reason behind the sacred tree's growth. He was full of anticipation. The road of revenge in the future will definitely be filled with slaughter, mountains of corpses and seas of blood. If the Blood Flame Sacred Tree continues to devour and grow stronger, it will become a king-grade divine item sooner or later. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. He thought of Burial of Heaven and couldn't help but tease. Burial of Heaven, how's your strength recovering? I'm not far from the Divine King realm. Even this Blood Flame Sacred Tree will soon become a king-grade divine object. You, on the other hand, shouldn't be outdone by this sacred tree. For a long time, Burial of Heaven had been keeping a low profile, recuperating and accumulating power in secret. Now that it heard Ji Tianqing's teasing, it finally let out a low and calm voice that sounded in Ji Tianqing's mind. You've been fighting and killing, and the Blood Flame Sacred Tree has absorbed a lot of energy. However, I haven't been idle either. I've also been absorbing useful energy and trying my best to recover my strength. Now that I've recovered to the level of a Supreme Monarch grade divine artifact, I've reached my limit due to the shackles of origin stones. If you want to recover to the level of a king-grade divine artifact, you'll have to do what you did in the past and go to the outer space to collect 108 stars and a few divine king-grade materials. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll never be able to recover to the level of a divine king. Ji Tianqing fell silent after hearing Burial of Heaven's words. Back then, when he was roaming the God realm and making rapid progress, he also continuously strengthened Burial of Heaven. In order to make Burial of Heaven a king-grade divine artifact, he traveled to various continents in search of various divine king-grade materials. When Burial of Heaven broke through to the divine king grade, he went to the outer space and spent 100 years refining 108 stars as materials to upgrade the divine artifact. It was because of this that Burial of Heaven became a top king-grade divine artifact and was invincible in the God realm. Unfortunately, the current Ji Tianqing hadn't even stepped out of the Tianbei region, let alone travel to various continents. As for going to the outer space, that was even more wishful thinking. Without reaching the Divine King realm, it was impossible to break through the void and enter the universe. After all, this was the God realm, a high-class plane. It wasn't like the low-class planes, where space was very weak and could easily break through the void. After pondering for a moment, Ji Tianqing finally spoke to pacify Burial of Heaven. Old friend, don't worry. You first focus on accumulating strength. When I find the Divine King grade materials, I'll definitely help you break through to the Divine King grade. As for going to the outer space to refine the stars, that will have to wait until I recover to the Divine King grade. Burial of Heaven responded and said in a low voice, I know, you must have a plan. Actually, you've only returned to the God realm for 2 years, and it's already very heaven-defying for you to have such strength today. Compared to your previous life, your speed of improvement is 100 times faster. I believe that you'll be able to recover to the Divine King grade in 3 to 5 years at most. 3 to 5 years? Ji Tianxing frowned and said with a chuckle, It sounds very short and shocking, but I still think it's too slow. After all, Wuhan is still in the Dragon Realm. After recovering to the Divine King grade, I have to go to the Dragon Realm to find him as soon as possible. Burial of Heaven comforted, Don't worry, Wuhan will be blessed by the heavens. Maybe it's not a disaster for him to be captured in the Dragon Realm. Maybe it's an opportunity. In short, you just have to follow the plan step by step. After saying that, Burial of Heaven fell into silence. Ji Tianxing did not say anything else and began to cultivate. He consumed a large amount of origin stones, divine stones, and other resources, and absorbed the power of the blood flame sacred tree to focus on cultivating a technique. This technique was gradually comprehended and created by him during his recent seclusion. He temporarily named it the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art. As the name implied, this divine art was comprehended by him by observing the Heaven-Punishing Sword formation. With the Heaven-Punishing Sword formation as the main support, he gradually deduced and figured it out with the hundreds of Sword Dao abilities and thousands of divine arts from his previous life. Of course, the current Heaven-Punishing Divine Art only had a general idea, direction, and cultivation method. It was just a prototype and not a complete technique. But this was a divine art that Ji Tianxing created by combining the cultivation experience of his previous life with the mysteries of the Heaven-Punishing Sword formation. In terms of profundity and power, it definitely surpassed any technique that he cultivated in his previous life. If he could deduce this technique to the extreme, it was very likely that he could evolve an unparalleled divine art secret. Currently, the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art is only a prototype. I can only be considered as a beginner. I'm still in the process of exploring and deducing. When I deduce the first level and cultivate it to perfection, I should be able to recover to the Divine King grade. Ji Tianxing thought to himself, full of confidence and anticipation for the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art. Chapter 3159. In the warped spacetime, time passed extremely quickly. But Ji Tianxing concentrated on cultivation, fully focused on deducing and comprehending the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art, completely forgetting the passage of time. Every day that passed, he would carry out hundreds of deductions and attempts on the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art. As day after day passed, the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art was perfected at a slow speed, continuously advancing towards an even more profound and powerful realm. Ji Tianxing's strength also slowly increased along with it, becoming stronger day after day. Unknowingly, a year passed. The Heaven-Punishing Divine Art's first-level cultivation method was perfected by Ji Tianxing to 70%. His strength also quietly reached the limits of the 7th-level Divine Lord realm. But he was immersed in the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art, deducing, exploring, and experimenting tirelessly. He did not think of impacting 8th-level Divine Lord realm at all. But cultivation, this sort of thing, was complementary to each other in the first place. Even if he did not deliberately attack the bottleneck and focused on cultivating the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art, he could similarly increase his strength, crossing over obstacles and bottleneck. Just like this, another year passed. In this 1 year, the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art's progress became even slower, merely perfecting 30%. But the Heaven-Punishing Divine Art's first-level cultivation method, Ji Tianxing successfully deduced it. Even though he only cultivated the first-level cultivation method to the realm of just entering the rudimentary realm and was still very far from proficient and major success, and even further away from grand completion. But he still broke through the bottleneck naturally, reaching 8th level Divine Lord realm. When breaking through, Ji Tianqing's entire body gave off a rainbow-colored divine light. 8 divine dragon phantoms condensed above his head, spiraling and dancing for a few days before dissipating. Swoosh! When the 8 dragon phantoms dissipated and the rainbow-colored divine light converged, Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation. He opened both eyes, his gaze like 2 bolts of lightning, striking the warped spacetime until it fluctuated. He emitted an overbearing and sacred aura all over his body, only withdrawing it into his body after a while. The heaven-punishing divine art that I created is indeed a feasible path. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself, his spirits roused and filled with anticipation. A moment later, he got up and observed the surroundings, muttering to himself, I've already been in close seclusion for 2 years and successfully broke through to the 8th stage realm. Half a month should have passed in the outside world. I think Lin Shui, left emissary Jean, and the others should have recovered by about 70 to 80%, right? Ji Tianqing looked around and saw Yunyao, Jiku, Bai Long, and Zhen Hong cultivating. Even Ji Wushuang was also concentrating on cultivating. The current her already successfully broke through to the Divine Lord realm, reaching the 1st level Divine Lord realm. She had been taught by Yun Yao and Ji Ku since she was young, so she knew the importance of strengthening the foundation of Shinto. At this moment, she was consolidating her foundation of the Divine Tao and accumulating her strength. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing nodded slightly with satisfaction. His gaze then fell on Zhen Hong. Zhen Hong cultivated for 2 years and his injuries had long recovered. He was currently at the critical juncture of assaulting the 5th level Divine Lord realm. If it was in the past, her bloodline power had not been stimulated, and her talent and comprehension were not enough. Even if he tried a few hundred times, he might not succeed. However, things were different now. She had only broken through the bottleneck 7 times, and she was about to succeed. Seeing that there was no suspense in her breakthrough this time, Ji Tianqing felt relieved and left the divine pagoda. Swoosh! A white light flashed. Ji Tianqing returned to the cave. Inside the gloomy and quiet cave, Lin Shui's divine ship was suspended in the air. Ji Tianqing entered the divine ship and rushed to the assembly hall. It was only to see that Lin Shui's injuries had long recovered and ended her cultivation. She was currently sitting in the hall with her eyes closed to rest her mind. Sensing that Ji Tianqing had arrived, she opened both eyes and greeted him. Tianqing, your closed seclusion ended, eh? Really seeing the devil, it's only been a short half a month, how did you become stronger again? Lin Shui just wanted to exchange a few pleasantries with him, but discovered to her surprise that Ji Tianqing's strength became stronger again. Even though she could not see through Ji Tianqing's ins and outs, and only felt that he was unfathomable. But she could feel that Ji Tianqing's aura was several times stronger than before. To actually have such a horrifying improvement in such a short time, it was simply terrifying. Ji Tianqing revealed a faint smile and waved his hand. Don't be so surprised. You've known me for so long, haven't you gotten used to it yet? Lin Shui glared at him and said exasperatedly, Pervert! Ji Tianqing frowned and said unhappily, Don't scold me. I'm not scolding you, I'm praising you. Lin Shui rolled her eyes. Ji Tianqing could not be bothered to chat with her, and asked about serious matters. What about the others? How's the recovery of their injuries? Lin Shui said lazily, I've already asked them, they're more or less recovered. If you need anything, I'll get them to gather immediately. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, No need to gather, let them continue to cultivate. I'll steer the divine ship, we'll continue south. With that, he turned to leave and headed to the control room of the divine ship. Lin Shui got up and followed him. She tilted her head and asked, Looks like you're determined to go to the royal city and kill Prince Lien and the Emperor of Raging Flame? Ji Tianqing did not stop walking and answered without turning his head, Prince Lien must be killed. As for the Emperor of Raging Flame, we'll see if he's courting death. Lin Shui raised her eyebrows and smiled. Hee, I like your domineering attitude. You were already strong enough, and now you've become even stronger. It looks like you can do whatever you want in the Great Yin Empire and no one can stop you. Ji Tianxing stepped into the control room, waved his hand to activate the divine formation, and started to steer the divine ship. As he steered the divine ship, he said calmly, "That's not accurate. You can't limit yourself to the Great Yin Empire. You should look at the entire Tianbei region. To be precise, I'm invincible under the Divine King realm now." Lin Shui's body stiffened and she rolled her eyes. "Kid, don't you understand something? When others praise you, you should be more humble. That way, others will praise you in the future. You're so straightforward and arrogant. You're so annoying." Ji Tianxing turned to look at her and smiled mockingly. "It's good that you hate me. When I heard you say that you like me just now, you gave me a shock. When did I say that I like you?" Lin Shui was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She immediately jumped up and exploded. On the surface, she looked very fierce and angry. However, her slightly red cheeks and stuttering voice made her seem a little guilty. "Let's pretend that you didn't say anything." Ji Tianxing retracted his gaze and focused on steering the divine ship. After flying out of the cave, he flew high up into the sky at lightning speed. Lin Shui glared at him angrily. Seeing that he did not react, she did not want to harp on this topic. After a moment of silence, seeing that Ji Tianxing did not speak, she felt a little awkward. She pretended to be cold and said, "I'll leave the divine ship to you. I'll continue to cultivate. If there's nothing important, I don't want to see you." Ji Tianxing didn't have much of a reaction. He just responded and focused his attention on the various divine formations. They looked like the divine formations that controlled the divine ship. They were more attractive than anything else. Lin Shui was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She stomped her foot and turned to leave. Chapter 3160. Ji Tianxing steered the divine warship and flew over the vast mountain range, leaving the Sky Wolf County. Next, the divine warship entered the Raging Flame County and was not far from the royal city. The news of Ji Tianxing's decisive battle in the Sky Wolf City had already spread throughout the Raging Flame Divine Country. Regardless of the size of the factions or sects, they all knew that the 7 major sects had been completely wiped out. In an instant, the entire Raging Flame Divine Country was shaken. Countless factions were shocked and panicked as they discussed spiritedly. At the same time, the news of Ji Tianxing killing more than 1,000 Sky Wolf City guards had also spread throughout the Divine Country. Everyone knew about it. The King of Raging Flame even issued an edict to dispatch a large number of Imperial Guards to encircle and annihilate Ji Tianxing. The various county guards also had to assist. As a result, the entire Raging Flame Divine Country entered a state of war readiness. Ji Tianxing and the others became public enemies. As long as they appeared in front of the public, they would be besieged. However, this was only on the surface. Or rather, this was only the hope of the various factions and the common people. In reality, Ji Tianxing steered the divine warship and flew continuously for 3 days and 3 nights without being attacked or intercepted. Only a few Divine Lord experts formed groups of 3 to 5 to secretly track and check the divine warship's track. Although there was a certain factor in this, it was that the divine warship was too fast and difficult to track. However, only a few people understood the deeper reason. The King of Raging Flame issued an edict only for the common people of the divine country to see. It is also equivalent to an official declaration of war against me. But in reality, the King of Raging Flame is very clear that the Imperial Guards and the various county guards cannot kill me. No matter how many come, they will all be sent to their death. Instead of dispatching the Imperial Guards to encircle and annihilate me with great fanfare, it is better to send elite experts to keep track of our movements. At the same time, gather a large number of troops and powerful generals outside the royal city and have another decisive battle with us. In the discussion hall of the divine worship. This was Ji Tianqing's answer to everyone's questions. At this moment, the divine worship had already reached the hinterland of the raging flame county and would arrive outside the royal city tomorrow morning. Ji Tianqing handed the divine battleship over to left emissary Jin. He gathered Xuelin, blood illusion god monarch, Zhen Hong, and the others for a small meeting. With regards to the upcoming final battle, Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion and the rest were nervous and uneasy. Even though they all believed that Ji Tianqing's strength was absolutely invincible below Divine King. However, they were still worried and anxious. After all, Prince Lian and the King of the Raging Flame country had joined hands. Not to mention the Heavenly Union sect behind Prince Lian, just the power of the Raging Flame country's ruler was already terrifying enough. There were countless Imperial Guards, Imperial Palace experts, and Divine Lord powerhouses from the various county cities. The number of Divine Lord powerhouses was definitely astonishing. In this decisive battle, they would be fighting against half of the Raging Flame Divine country. How could they not be worried? Xuelin hesitated for a moment, then said, Tianqing, although you are very strong, we have too few people. Prince Lian and the ruler of the Raging Flame country will definitely gather an army of thousands, or even tens of thousands, to deal with us. The Divine Lord powerhouses that the two of them could mobilize were in the tens of thousands. No matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to escape the fate of ants biting an elephant to death. Sir God Blood Illusion also nodded in agreement and said, Young Master, although we haven't inquired about the movements of Prince Lian and the King of the Raging Flame country, the situation is already very obvious. Prince Lian and the King of the Raging Flame country will definitely do their best to kill us. Once we kill our way into the royal city, the King of the Raging Flame country will lose all face. Actually, we don't have to be so radical and take such a risk. There is no need for us to go alone and fight them head-on. The initiative is in our hands. We can use guerrilla warfare to harass them and kill them one by one. Compared to Lin Shui's straightforwardness, Sir God Blood Illusion's words were slightly more tactful. Moreover, his suggestion was rather pertinent, and everyone agreed to it. At least, the Blood Dragon Right Emissary, Zhen Hong, and Nie Feiyun all agreed with this suggestion. Only Bai Long raised an objection. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to speak, he explained, Master is well aware of everyone's concerns. However, please believe that Master never fights a battle that he is not confident in. With the divine powers that Master has mastered and the divine pagoda, he is in an invincible position. At the very least, even if we are trapped in the formation of 10,000 troops, we will be safe and can retreat smoothly. However, this situation is absolutely impossible. Not only will Master be absolutely safe, but all of us will be alive, and there will be no danger to our lives. In addition, Master has absolute power. Why do we need to use guerrilla warfare and kill them one by one? If we really do that, Prince Lian and the King of the Raging Flame country will laugh at us. What Master needs to do is to crush them all in an invincible manner. Only in this way can we win to our heart's content. Hearing Bai Long's words, Lin Shui and the others fell silent. Since everyone's safety was guaranteed, what else was there to say? Moreover, Ji Tianqing's reputation in the Bloody Flame and Raging Flame Divine Kingdoms was like thunder that struck fear in people's hearts. He had already become synonymous with lawless, domineering and invincible, and killing God. If they really used guerrilla warfare to harass him, wouldn't they lose their prestige and reputation? When they thought of this, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others no longer tried to persuade them. Seeing that everyone was silent, Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, All right, everyone, rest for a while and conserve your energy. There will be a fierce battle tonight. Moreover, this battle will definitely shock the other nations and make our names known throughout Great Yen. Just a few simple words were enough to make everyone's blood boil, and they were filled with fighting spirit. This was especially true for Lin Shui and Bai Long. They had always liked to fight and were filled with anticipation. Although the others were not as excited as the two of them, they were also looking forward to it. After all, as members of the divines who firmly pursued the peak of the divine path, who did not want to be famous. Not long after, everyone returned to their respective secret chambers and sat down to adjust their breathing. Half a day passed quickly. At dawn, the divine ship flew into a vast mountain range. This mountain range was called Flying Dragon Mountain. The mountain range was not big. It ran from east to west and spanned 1,000,000 miles. This was the barrier to the north of the Raging Flame capital. After crossing Flying Dragon Mountain and crossing hundreds of thousands of miles of plains, they would arrive at the Raging Flame capital. When the Raging Flame Divine Nation was first established, this was the last line of defense for the Raging Flame capital during the war between the nations. Tonight, this was the last line of defense for Prince Lien and the Emperor of Raging Flame. Among the mountains, on the highest peak of Sky Dragon Mountain, Long Air, the Heavenly Union Sect Master, the Imperial Guard Governor, and a few great generals were armed and ready as they waited quietly. These 8 experts had the highest statuses. They were also the commanders of the army tonight. Behind them, 50 higher divine lords were lined up in a row. There were men and women of all ages, and their appearances and attire were different. Half of them were experts from the inner court who stayed in the palace for a long time and rarely showed themselves. There were also the protectors and elders of the Heavenly Union Sect's Raging Flame branch. The other half were the higher divine lords raised by Prince Lien and the Emperor of Raging Flame. These people on the mountain peak were the main force of tonight's battle. There were more than 10,000 elites lying in ambush within 3,000 miles. Tonight, rivers of blood were destined to flow. Chapter 3161. The night sky was as black as ink, devoid of any starlight. At the peak of Sky Dragon Mountain, cold winds howled, and killing intent filled the air. Even the heavens seemed to know that there would be a bloody battle tonight, and they were mourning. Dragon 2, the Heavenly Unity Sect Master, and the Imperial Army Governor waited patiently. Many experts stared at the northern night sky with awe-inspiring gazes, waiting for the light to appear. Waiting in silence was the most torturous. Time seemed to slow down. Only an hour passed, but it felt like an eternity to them. Finally, in the dark night sky of the north, a ray of light appeared. Whoosh! A pitch-black divine ship that was thousands of feet long flew across the sky, shining with 5-colored light. When it was still 1,000 miles away from Sky Dragon Mountain, the divine ship slowed down. The divine ship didn't conceal itself, nor did it conceal its aura. When it appeared, the expressions of Dragon 2, the Heavenly Unity Sect Master, and many experts changed. Anger appeared on their faces, and they frowned. Their gazes became even colder and sharper. Tianxing is here. Everyone, prepare to set up the array. Dragon 2 said in a low voice as he stared at the divine ship. Although he was humble and flattering in front of Prince Lien, he still had to act humble and flattering. But in front of outsiders, he was cold and arrogant. Tonight, he represented Prince Lien in supervising the battle, and his status was the most honorable. Hearing Dragon 2's order, the dozens of high-level divine lords on the mountain peak immediately flew into the sky and spread out, forming a line of defense. The remaining high-level divine lords all had honorable statuses. They all followed Dragon 2 into the night sky to meet the divine ship. Among these high-level divine lords, the one whose status was second only to Dragon 2 was the sect master of the Heavenly Unity Sect's Raging Flame branch, Liang Jianqing. After all, he was the mainstay of the Heavenly Unity Sect and one of Prince Lien's most trusted subordinates. The third person was the Imperial Guard's governor under the direct rule of the ruler, Yi Liangun. In the army, these 3 were the strongest, having reached the 8th level of the Divine Lord realm. As for the 4 golden-armored generals, Their status was second only to the imperial army governor. They were the pillars of the raging flame divine country, fierce generals who had gone through countless battles. They were titled the Four Directions Divine Generals, and each of them commanded millions of troops. There were also 3 high deity sovereigns in strange attire. They were strange people who were raised by the monarch. They were known as the Starbreaker 3 Elders. It was said that these 3 eccentric experts came from the south of the Tianbei region. They were once powerful figures in an empire. But in the great changes 1,000 years ago, that empire disappeared, and they fled all the way north. Many years ago, the 3 Starbreakers had come to the great Yen Empire and taken root in the Raging Flame Divine Nation. For some reason, the king of the Raging Flame country got acquainted with the 3 elders of the Star Shatterer Kingdom. Then, he took them into the royal palace and conferred them the title of Consecrator. The status of the 3 Starbreakers was second only to the imperial army governor and the 4 cardinal divine generals, much higher than those experts of the inner court. A total of 10 divine monarchs stood in a row in the night sky as they watched the divine battleship gradually approach. A moment later, the divine warship stopped in the night sky when it was still 100 miles away from the crowd. Shua! A white light flashed, and Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui, Blood Illusion God and the others appeared. Even Nie Feiyun followed behind Ji Tianqing. Only the left emissary Jin and the right emissary of the Blood Dragon stayed in the divine warship to control it. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, Qian Yu and the Black Dragon also made preparations in the distorted space and time, ready to appear and join the battle at any time. The 2 sides faced each other in the night sky. Dragon 2 and the Imperial Army Governor led one side, and they had the advantage in numbers. As for Ji Tianqing, there were only a few people beside him. In comparison, they seemed very weak and pitiful. But no one dared to underestimate them. The expressions of Long Air, Liang Jianqing, and Yi Liangan were extremely serious. They were filled with vigilance. Ji Tianqing looked around and glanced at the 10 commanders and the 50 high deity sovereigns who had formed a line of defense. He couldn't help but shake his head. Why isn't Prince Lien here? Why is he hiding in the royal city to recuperate? Is he afraid that I'll kill him in an instant? He stared at Dragon 2, Liang Jianqing, and Yi Liangan with a dignified gaze as he asked in a low voice. Although his voice wasn't loud, it spread hundreds of miles and countless people heard it clearly. Many deity sovereigns felt a strong sense of anger and humiliation. Their fighting spirit and killing intent surged in their hearts. Dragon 2 stared at Ji Tianqing and said expressionlessly, "What kind of noble status does His Highness have? Why would he attack personally? You're not qualified to do so with your identity as a villain. Moreover, His Highness is planning from thousands of miles away. Sending us servants is more than enough to tear you to pieces." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at Long Air seriously. Then, he said, "It seems that you're the leader of this motley crew. If I'm not wrong, you should be Prince Lien's most trusted aide, right?" Nie Feiyun, who was standing behind Ji Tianqing, saw Dragon 2's appearance and transmitted his voice to Ji Tianqing. "Young master, this person is called Dragon 2. He's Prince Lien's personal bodyguard and his closest aide. In the past, Prince Lien's orders were mostly conveyed by Dragon 2. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. At this time, Dragon 2's voice was as cold as a bell. "My identity isn't important. Everyone here tonight only has one identity. That is, a chivalrous person who upholds the good and punishes the evil on behalf of Tianqing. Tianqing, you're a demon who went on a killing spree in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom and killed countless people. We come from all over the world and belong to different races and forces. Yet, we have to work together to kill you. Even the powerhouses of the Imperial Guard Corps have personally arrived. With so many of us besieging you, you should be honored to be buried here tonight." Dragon 2 clearly didn't want to reveal everyone's identities and origins, so he made up a dignified cover. Ji Tianqing and the others sneered, but they were too lazy to expose such a low-level lie. Ha ha! Last time, the people who threatened to kill me all died on Wolf Head Mountain. Tonight, the same thing happened again. I admire your courage. But it's a pity that you guys aren't enough to kill. Ji Tianqing sneered, shaking his head as he spoke. There was even some regret in his tone. These words thoroughly angered the 4 Directions Divine Generals, the 3 Star Breakers, and the 50 High Divine Lords. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. They gnashed their teeth and cursed Ji Tianqing, angrily roaring. At this time, Heavenly Harmony Sect Master Liang Jianqing raised his palms, indicating for everyone to quiet down. He waved his hand and sent out several golden sword lights, which flew high into the sky. Soon, more than 10,000 elite experts appeared in the night sky from all directions. Among them, several thousand people were wearing standard armor. They were clearly the Imperial Guard Corps. There were also many people wearing the same robes and attire. They clearly came from various factions. These 13,000 over people's strength realm were all 8th-level celestial deity realm and above. There were even 2,000 people whose strength reached the Divine Lord realm. So many elite experts formed a massive encirclement, sealing off a radius of 3,000 miles. Liang Jianqing stared at Ji Tianqing and said with a cold smile, "Brat, is it enough to kill you now?" Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent as he shook his head again. Still not enough. Chapter 3162. Humph. Arrogant to the extreme. Liang Jianqing frowned and snorted coldly. But Imperial Army Governor Yi Liang-an was so angry that he started laughing. He pointed at the army in the night sky and sneered at Ji Tianqing. "Kid, we all know that you are very strong and that you have many tricks up your sleeves. However, open your eyes wide and take a good look at how elite and valiant this 13,000-strong army is. These soldiers are not like the motley crew of the 7 major sections. Plus, we have 60 high-level divine lords. Is it not enough to kill you? Even a spit from each of us can drown you." The 4 Directions Divine Generals and the 3-Star Breaking Elders grinned coldly. The high-level Divine Lords in the night sky also chimed in. However, Ji Tianqing remained unmoved. With an indifferent expression, he said, "You've misheard. I'm not talking about whether these people can kill me. I am saying that these 13,000 people are not enough for me to kill. I'll give you one more chance. Let those who are hiding in the dark come at me together. If they don't act now, they won't have the chance when the battle starts." His tone was calm and he was not bluffing. However, the confidence and dominance in his words left countless divine lords dumbfounded. Their expressions turned particularly interesting. After a moment of silence, the crowd came back to their senses. They exploded with angry curses, excited shouts, and disdainful sneers. "God-damned beast, your arrogance knows no bounds. This old man has lived for 20,000 years and has never seen such an arrogant and shameless person. Kid, do you really think you are a killing god? You think too highly of yourself. Tonight, we will end your undefeated legend and let you die without a burial place. Don't waste words with that bastard. Everyone, kill. Kill him. No matter the cost, we must burn his bones and scatter his ashes." Lian Er, Liang Jianqing, and Yi Liang-an were already filled with humiliation and grief. Their bodies were bursting with anger and killing intent. Seeing that the soldiers were so agitated that they only wanted to attack, the 3 of them no longer hesitated. They waved their hands and gave the order to attack. "Kill! Kill him! Soldiers, grind the bones of the bandits to dust! Tonight, we will make him pay with his blood." As the 3 of them roared, the 10,000-strong army, which had been ready to attack for a long time, suddenly couldn't hold back their murderous intent and charged forward without any regard for their own safety. "Kill! Brothers, charge! Kill the enemy and tear them to shreds. The monarch has decreed that whoever can chop off Tianqing's head will be conferred the title of Count and the title of Lord of a county. For the glory of Scandinavia, charge! In a split second, earth-shattering battle cries resounded in the night sky from all directions. As the many elite experts charged forward, the encirclement within a radius of 2,000 miles shrank rapidly. When the encirclement was narrowed to 500 to 600 miles, it would be the real close combat, the fiercest battle. The 10,000-plus elites were still charging forward, but the 50 high-level divine lords were the first to attack, using world-shaking divine abilities and ultimate skills. Sky-Sea Raging Dragon Explosion. God-slaying sword in 10 steps. 8 directional God-slaughtering fists. Unparalleled glass palm. Waning moon startles the heavens. The 50 high-level divine lords all used their ultimate killing moves with all their might. Instantly, a dazzling 5-colored divine light illuminated the night sky for thousands of miles. Divine abilities of various shapes and sizes, carrying with them an overwhelming murderous intent, rained down on Ji Tianqing and the others. The area became chaotic. Flames soared into the sky, thunder roared, lightning flashed, black clouds covered the sky, and hurricanes swept across. Faced with such a dangerous situation, Ji Tianqing and the others didn't panic, their expressions unchanged. After all, they were already mentally prepared. No matter how many enemies there were, no matter how loud their charge was, they had sufficient confidence in Ji Tianqing. As expected, Ji Tianqing also made a prompt decision to attack. He formed a divine seal with both hands and used the heaven-destroying sword array, instantly connecting with the stars in the sky. Instantly, 25,000 streaks of starlight appeared in the pitch-black sky, raining down like a meteor shower. Those were 25,000 giant divine swords formed from the power of the stars in the sky, containing a divine might and sword intent that could suppress everything. Ji Tianqing kept waving his hands, using divine Tao laws, adding dozens of nomological powers to the divine swords in the sky. Thus, when the 10,000 giant swords descended above their heads, they became even more extraordinarily powerful and indestructible. Swish, swish, swish. In a short span of time, the 25,000 giant divine swords enveloped an area of 1,000 miles, forming a giant sword net. Thousands of giant swords danced in the sky, releasing the most dazzling light. The divine abilities used by the 50 high-level divine lords were intercepted by the giant swords just as they reached the heads of Ji Tianqing and the others. Rumble, boom, crack, bam, 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 bam. The giant swords clashed with the divine abilities, creating a deafening explosion that reverberated between heaven and earth. Countless divine abilities exploded, but the giant swords in the sky were unharmed. The shock waves from the explosion carried with them countless fragments of divine light, spreading out in all directions. Ji Tianqing and the others were the closest, so they bore the brunt of the impact. People like Bai Long and Zhen Hong were weaker, so they were easily injured by the shockwaves. But Ji Tianqing was prepared. His body lit up with dazzling golden light, forming a giant shield that protected everyone within. No matter how the shockwaves struck, the golden shield was undamaged, and everyone was safe and sound. Just like that, the first round of attacks from the 50 high-level divine lords was easily neutralized by Ji Tianqing. The 10 commanders and the 50 high-level divine lords were all dumbfounded, shocked, and incredulous. This is the divine ability that he is best at, the one that is widely known, heavenly punishment? Lian Er frowned as he looked at the situation, his expression grave. Liang Jianqing nodded and said solemnly, back then, when he was dealing with the various sects, he used this move. Everyone knows that this divine ability sword formation is very powerful and can kill everything. But no one can break this sword formation, nor can they block the attacks of the sword formation. Imperial Army Governor Yi Liang unfrowned and thought for a while. Then he said solemnly, "This bastard used the sword formation to seal off an area of 1,000 miles, trapping all of us in the sword formation. Could it be that he wants to use this heavenly punishment sword formation to kill all 13,000 of us? Lien Er nodded and did not speak. Yi Liangen and the four directions divine general's expressions changed drastically. They could not help but exclaim, "This is impossible! How can there be a monarch-level divine formation in the world that can kill 13,000 elite experts? Perhaps only the legendary king-level divine formation can do that. That bastard is not a divine king, so how can he kill all of us?" No one answered his question. Everyone's mood was very heavy. At this moment, the heaven-destroying sword formation was completely formed, and it sped up. 10,000 giant swords sealed off the area, forming a sword net. The other 15,000 giant swords crisscrossed in the air for thousands of miles, attacking the army. Chapter 31:63. Under the bombardment of tens of thousands of swords, the world was in chaos, completely filled with sword light. The more than 10,000 elite experts were drowned by the sword lights before they could even use their divine spells to attack Ji Tianqing. Swish, 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 swish. Sharp piercing sounds continued to burst out. Under the attack of the 10,000 swords, blood splattered all over the sky. Those who were struck, pierced, or swept by the giant divine sword would have their limbs severed, while those who were heavily injured would explode into a rain of blood. For a moment, shrill screams and cries of near death, as well as angry curses, could be heard from all directions. In just 2 breaths of time, hundreds and thousands of experts had died tragically under the sword light, dying without a complete corpse. What was even more terrifying was that each of the giant swords seemed to have a life of their own as they slashed towards places with a lot of people. Tens of sword lights gathered together and formed a hurricane of sword blades, sweeping across the night sky without any fear. Anyone who was touched by the sword blade hurricane would be seriously injured even if they didn't die. Its power was terrifying. The army that had been full of confidence a moment ago was instantly stunned. Every single one of them was trembling with fear. Their hearts were filled with fear as they dodged and fled in panic. The attacking formation of the army was messed up, and a gap appeared in the huge encirclement. The morale of the army plummeted. Even though many lower and middle divine lords tried their best to block the giant sword and buy time for the heavenly gods to catch their breath. However, this was futile. The might of each sword was comparable to an attack from a high divine lord. Those low-level and middle-level divine lords could not withstand the might of the enormous sword at all. Just like that, the 13,000-strong army was gradually routed, and their numbers quickly dwindled. They were still able to maintain their formation. Even though they were from the same faction, they risked their lives to gather together and work together to block the giant sword's attack. More than 10,000 people were divided into more than 30 groups, each fighting on their own without any order. Seeing this, Lien Er, Liang Jianqing, and Yi Liang all frowned, their expressions turning even uglier. The problem that I was most worried about has finally appeared. The Lien Er's face was very dark. He sighed and said in a low voice, "I already guessed it. Although these 13,000 people are elites, they come from different forces. They have not been trained or worked together, so there is no tacit understanding. It would be fine if he won the battle and sang loudly all the way. If there is an emergency, it will be a mess like now." Liang Jianqing cursed as he blocked the giant swords. This sword formation covers 1,000 miles, and there are at least tens of thousands of giant swords. Why is the power of each giant sword so strong? Even we, high divine lords, are in a perilous situation. The slightest bit of carelessness and we will be injured by the enormous sword. It was easy to imagine how those 13,000 people would be able to withstand the attack of the giant sword. How did that despicable bastard Tianqing master such a terrifying skill? Yi Liang was full of worry as he said in a low voice, "Sirs, the battle has just begun and the situation is already so dangerous. We can't just watch and do nothing. We have to take action. Only we can stop Tianqing. Even if we can't kill him, we can at least suppress him. The red-haired old monster of the 3-star breaker elders grinned coldly and said, Commander Yi, it's easy for you to say. We have already done our best to block the attack of the 10,000 swords. How can we suppress that bastard? The other old monster with purple hair and the appearance of a 10-year-old child said in a strange tone, The battle has just begun. Only 1,000 people have died and you are already so panicked. If you feel so sorry for those trash, how about we just surrender? Let's see if that bastard Tianqing will let us go. These two people's words were quite harsh. Not only did they make Yi Liang An's expression turn ugly, but the 4 divine generals also showed anger. It seemed that they were about to start arguing and fighting among themselves. At this moment, the Lian heir said in a dignified tone, Cut the crap. Everyone has signed a military order for this operation. Either we die here or return victorious. No one can avoid it. The army's morale is weak. If this continues, they will definitely be defeated. Everyone, follow me. Do your best to restrain Tianqing. After saying that, the Lian heir took out 2 sabers and charged at Ji Tianqing. Liang Jianqing and Yi Liang An did not hesitate. They each took out their divine weapons and charged with the Lian heir. Immediately after, the 4 divine generals also braved the sword rain and charged at Ji Tianqing without any regard for their own safety. Only the 3-star breaker elders remained where they were, stunned for a moment. The 3 of them looked at each other and revealed helpless expressions. They could only brace themselves and attack. When the 10 commanders charged in front of Ji Tianqing, they realized that Ji Tianqing and the others were fighting with many high-level divine lords in the sword rain. Of the 50 high-level divine lords, more than 30 were still blocking the sword rain and assisting the army in attacking. Only a dozen or so of them charged near Ji Tianqing and attacked from 100 miles away, creating pressure for Ji Tianqing and the others. Ji Tianqing controlled the heaven-destroying sword formation to attack the army while casting spells to block the attack. Lin Shui, Blood Illusion, Zhen Hong, White Dragon, and the others stayed within Ji Tianqing's golden light shield and fought with the high-level divine lords around them. Even Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, Qian Yu, and Black Dragon left 9 Heavens, 10 Absolutes Pagoda and joined the battle. They were all beside Ji Tianqing and were protected by the golden light shield. They used all kinds of divine powers and supreme skills to attack with all their might. Those high-level divine lords could not break the golden light shield at all, nor could they hurt Ji Tianqing and the others. Instead, it was the counterattacks of Ji Tianqing and the others that gave them a lot of pressure. They blocked the attacks of the giant swords and neutralized the divine powers of Ji Tianqing and the others. Soon, they showed signs of defeat and were all injured. Fortunately, Lian heir, Liang Jianqing, Yi Liang An and the others arrived in time and joined the battle. The 4 directions divine generals and the 3 star breakers also surrounded Ji Tianqing and the others and attacked. The 10 commanders all used their divine powers and supreme skills and released all kinds of powerful killing moves. They attacked Ji Tianqing and the others like a flood. Suddenly, the pressure on Ji Tianqing and the others increased greatly. Cracks appeared on the golden light shield and it was in danger. As a result, the pressure on the high-level divine lords was greatly reduced. They hurriedly retreated a distance and took the opportunity to suppress their injuries and consume elixirs. Soon, 30 breaths of time passed. Ji Tianqing's golden light shield finally couldn't hold on any longer and exploded with a loud bang. Crack! The golden light shield shattered into pieces and scattered in the night sky. Without the protection of the shield, Lin Shui, Yun Yao, Ji Ku and the others were in an extremely dangerous situation. Seeing this, Lian heir, Liang Jianqing, Yi Liang An and the others were overjoyed. They became more spirited and attacked even more crazily. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing made a decision and took out the Jiutian Tenju Tower. Swish! The divine tower instantly expanded to 10,000 feet tall and released a mysterious black light that sucked everyone in. Only Ji Tianxing was left outside the Divine Tower. The attacks of the high-level Divine Lords landed on the Divine Tower and made a deafening sound, but it was not effective.